Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
William drove the last kilometers of the road, relying on his own intuition. His ability to anticipate had been working well for him since childhood, and he had developed it with special exercises. Sam told him in detail how to get to his ranch, but William did not try to memorize the details because he hoped to rely on the navigator. "Don't worry, friend. You know, I've been in more than my share of trouble and always came out a winner. And your dacha, Sam, I'm looking for it blindfolded." He remembers how his comrade looked at him with condemnation. Overconfidence sometimes leads to unpredictable consequences. "And I don't have a cottage, I have a ranch. Remember the word ranch." William then laughed at his friend, who tried to organize his life in a Western manner, which was at least strange for a police lieutenant colonel. I remember that. But tell me, did you bring in any buffalo for breeding?" He hoped the question would make his friend think, but Sam just smirked. "No. I've got ostriches, but they're not like the ones in the pictures. They're two-legged. Instead of feathers, they're wearing ragged t-shirts and shorts. They swear and like beer." William pulled his eyes out in surprise, because he couldn't imagine us losing ostriches in khaki shirts. But Sam laughed, satisfied with the effect on his comrades. "You're trying to catch me out of habit thinking you're the smartest." "No, brother, I'm the smartest on the subject. My ranch is for a whole other purpose. Come and see for yourself, but I'm sure you'll like it very much. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been so insistent on inviting you." The occasion for the party was a serious one. Sam had just been promoted to colonel, and such events are usually celebrated in a big way, and the culprit decided to throw a party at his ranch. Although William had never been to his old friend's country estate before, he already had an idea of what it looked like. In fact, all the way there William had been doing nothing but stalling his imagination, which was giving him the most ridiculous and implausible options in retaliation for his anxiety. He chose the three most appropriate ones and even voiced them for laughs. When the electronic voice of the guide expressed uncertainty about the correct route, you stuffed solace. And then there's something like a cabin. A ranger's lodge would also seem to me to be a good fit. But these options were even more confusing to the smart devices. So William had to use his intuition. Fortunately for him, Twilight had not yet had time to fully enlist the surrounding space, and the former internal affairs officers on the tire tracks on the sandy road and other signs himself determined the right direction. He crossed a small forest, which also not so long ago, judging by the obvious signs, had been overcome by a whole cavalcade of cars, and found himself in the open space. It was a plain of hut, born not of deep lugs. Not far away loomed the hulks of the hut that had once stood there. In the replacing twilight, this picture looked mystical, and the man involuntarily burst out. "Judging by Sam's descriptions, I'm on the right track to try to dial him." But the cell phone did not want to respond to the owner's attempt to call his friend. William in hearts threw the useless device into the back seat, where a bouquet of flowers was bored alone. Advanced technology, damn it. 4, 5, none of this stuff works in the middle of nowhere. Sam picked a good spot. William got back in the car. He might have had to wander the unfamiliar terrain for hours, if it hadn't been for the lights that appeared at the same time near the ghost village. William drove at minimum speed across the field toward the fire, risking a flat tire or a ravine. He was almost there when the navigator suddenly came to life. "In 500 meters, you come to your destination." The man whined. "Wow, now that's real modern technology. Didn't do a damn thing. When did they almost get there? Decided to take all the credit. I'm not blind, I can see it automatically." The voice wanted to tell him something else, but William turned off the device. "Everybody get some rest. You haven't lived up to my trust. I almost got lost. And who makes so many of you? Artificial intelligence? Apparently, it is only designed to be silent when it is necessary to shout out." The host hurried to the car of the newly arrived guest. "We've been waiting. Where have you been?" William got out of the back seat. The bouquet got a little messed up. "I was testing the navigation system, but it's not ready to work in the middle of nowhere like this." "Say, couldn't you have picked a more civilized place for your ranch?" Sam was forced to admit yes, we have wild mushrooming places here every year. Listen, who are the flowers for? What kind of questions to your wife? Sam patted his comrade on the shoulder. It seems, William, that you have completely left the business and forgotten that such events as receiving the next rank are celebrated in a purely male company. And there's no room for pretty ladies on my ranch. It's like a ship, and the traditions are the same. Of course, sometimes, or rather rarely, I ask my women to clean up this den, and they make the place look nice. So your bouquet is inappropriate. Save it for your wife. William carelessly tossed and finishes the flowers back to their original place and slammed the car doors. He didn't want to spoil his friend's mood with tales of his failure, of his personal family life, so he tried to steer the conversation in a different direction. Sam, where's that ranch of yours? I don't see any signs of habitation around here. The newly minted colonel grinned again. It's all in front of you. What are you so surprised about? Or did you expect to see a cottage of 2 stories and 2 native entrances? No, my dear, the very word ranch implies something different. Freedom from stereotypes. First of all, knowing your character, I didn't expect a cottage, but at least some semblance of a dwelling. It's just a field. The friend again passed his heavy hand over the guest's shoulder. Don't worry, there are roofs over your head. You can't see my house in the dark, but there's a lot of space here, and the river is just a stone's throw away. Tomorrow morning, if you want to, we can go fishing. William waved his head. No, of course he wanted to go fishing. But he was a businessman. He's got a meeting. He has a job, a reputation, money. William grinned to himself. How he'd learned to talk himself into it. Thanks for the invitation, but I don't think I can make it. I have to meet a client tomorrow morning. From the side of the fire, where a group of men were crowding, shouted Sam, "Let's come, these pizzas are ready, and people's souls are burning." The host nudged his friend, "Let's go, or my guys will take offense." The pizza today was a great success. It's a pity, of course, that you have a car. You know, pizza without an escort isn't the same. William didn't say anything, figured Sam wouldn't break him today, although the celebration was outdoors. The tables were set in a gazebo-like structure. Everything was modest, but tasteful. The guests were squeezed in, and William was seated in the resulting gap between the host and an unfamiliar boy of about 25. Sam proudly announced young Shift just out of the academy. Very promising young man. I really hope that we'll be faithful to the cause of the guy, without taking time off from the main duty. I laconically introduced myself to James. And you, William, I know you. We have crossed paths once before. You were a great help to the investigation. William looked at the guy's face and exclaimed happily, the exact case of the missing wives. The guy was in a lot of trouble, and the investigation was a dead end. Aha. And then it turned out that the sufferer was the successor to the legendary Bluebeard. He used to get rid of wives, and then the talented one played the part of the unhappy widower. Yeah, it was a high-profile case. And William was clearly aware that if it hadn't been for his help, the man might not have been caught. James filled his glass and addressed the audience. Friends, this is an extraordinary evening, and I am happy to be presented with the honor of being the first to congratulate our guru Sam. There are many beautiful words in the explanatory dictionary, but among them, there are none that are worthy of this man. Sam has been fighting crime practically around the clock for over 20 years. On his account, hundreds of solved cases and saved lives. This man has brought up more than one generation of professionals, and we are all happy to see him promoted in rank and position. Toward the end of pompous speeches, James was completely confused. But from all sides were heard approving cheers. Well done, James. He really hit the nerve. From the expression on the face of the newly minted colonel, it was obvious that he liked the congratulations. He raised his glass and nodded to William. "Come on, friend, guest," muttered Sam. "I've only slept in my quarters at the wheel." "There is enough room for everyone, and tomorrow you will go to the city with an escort to meet your customers. Tonight's the night. Don't insult me." It was useless to resist any further, and William took 2 gulps and decided on a glass of wine. Toasts followed one after another, and the guests ate quickly. There came a moment when one particularly creative comrade demanded Sam's epaulets on the table and they should be washed. Otherwise, they wouldn't hold. James pours some whiskey here. The instigator held out a large cut glass, and the volunteer toastmaster filled it to the brim. And now, Ben, give us your stars. The unofficial ritual of the men's company was carried out at a high level. At the same time, the officers did not forget those who are no longer in their ranks. The initiators of washing out epaulets sadly said, "They talk about us a lot and not always in a positive way, but we do not take offense and carry out our service because we know how important our work is. Let's remember, friends, those who died on duty." Everyone drank in silence and began to slowly fraternize around the clearing. William had already had time to get used to the darkness and noticed a tent nearby. The host followed his gaze. "It's the guys from my team who have come to go fishing. If you want, you can join them. You're an avid fisherman." William said with a sigh of regret, "I'd love to, but I can't work. You realize my clients aren't the kind of people you can just move." Sam looked straight into his friend's eyes. "I'm sorry, William, for prying into your soul without permission, but I still can't understand what it is you want to understand. How you traded your vocation for money. I'm sorry to be so blunt." William pretended not to be hurt by the direct accusation of betrayal, but his trembling voice betrayed his agitation. "Sam, every man is free to choose what is in his best interest. Yes, I will not deny that I entered the academy as a vocation, and at the time, your help was invaluable. But once I got into the system, I realized it wasn't what we were told it was. William, don't try to justify your act with ridiculous explanations. You were lured with a bunch of greenbacks and you went. But I'm not going to judge you or lecture you. You're right about one thing. Everyone chooses their own path in life, and you're entitled to that too. But remember, one day there will come a time when the shadows from the past will return." William felt sick. He was silent for a long time, and then asked in a depressed voice, "Sam, have you had this happen before? I mean your statement about money." "Yes. I must confess, it's not exactly a pleasant thing when they come back. I could have saved the bomb back then, but I didn't. It was only centimeters short. Why were they missing? William, the answer is clear because I was scared, and even if it was just a moment of confusion. But those moments were not enough to overcome those damn meters." William also remembered well that incident when they were in the Navy. Suddenly a strong storm came, and the commander sent the three of them on deck. "Guys, we've got to secure the equipment or it'll blow out to sea. You're nimble, you can do it." Observing all the rules of precaution, the sailors began to fulfill the task. Alex at some point lost his vigilance and was immediately caught by a stray wave. The guy immediately shouted, "Sam, give me your hand, I'm being carried away." Sam was frantically grabbing with one hand whatever he could grab onto, and the other hand was being pulled towards his friend, who was a few steps away from him. Sam, too, was trying to cope with the elements, and he was seconds short of saving his friend. He saw how another more powerful wave picked up Alex and carried him into the sea. William came to the rescue too late. When Alex in desperation shouted, "Friends, help, William," and threw overboard a life preserver. But the Alex never showed above water again. For several days after the storm, the unfortunate man was searched for. But this search was unsuccessful. The whole crew at that time felt the loss hard. Sam never said that the death of his comrade was his fault. William tried to reassure him. "You're the one raking up the past. That's why the shadows are knocking at your door. You're not to blame for what happened back then. I mean, we were just kids back then. And to take that step you're talking about, you'd have had to let go of the rope without a safety net, and you'd have been swept overboard too. In my mind, I understand that. My conscience doesn't give me peace." The friends were silent for a while. Then Sam suggested that they should start matchmaking soon. "Come on, I'll see you off. At least a little hurry before the road." They walked about 50 meters and stopped in front of a modest house in rustic style. "This is where I'm staying. I plan to redecorate it later, but time is tight." Sam fumbled for the switch on the wall, and an old-fashioned lamp flashed under the low ceiling. He settled down on the sofa, "And I'll be in the next room. If you need anything, call me." William saw that his friend wanted to ask him something else, but did not dare. Sam spills everything he's got to say. We're not gymnasium friends, we're practically battle buddies. That's for sure. You know, I met your Helen by chance the other day. She pretended not to recognize me. You don't talk to her at all. William had already had time to lie down on the sofa, but the landlord's question took him by surprise. Yeah, Sam. Do you know how to hit a sore spot? I don't feel like talking about it. I haven't cared about my first wife for a long time, so any contact between us is excluded. Sam flicked the light switch and went into the next room. William was still curled up on the sofa for a long time, and he hardly had time to fall asleep. The excited shouts of fishermen came from the street. The guest realized that he would not be able to get a good night's sleep, and he too went outside. Sam tried to talk him out of it. William, you haven't slept properly yet. Can you get in trouble? It's okay. We'll get past your dogs. And if I get pulled over, you'll have to help me out. By the way, someone promised me an escort yesterday. I thought you were going back to town with everyone else. Are you an individualist? William made no reply to this remark. He hurriedly said goodbye to his host and got into the car. It was almost 200 kilometers to the city. And all the way he thought about money from the past, which recently began to burst into his life more and more often, reminding him of old sins and mistakes. After the collapse of a huge country for a long time, as if by inertia many habits were still in force, and the tradition of youth camps was surprisingly tenacious. Of course, these were not the camps that many people had unpleasant associations with the regime of the middle of the last century. This widespread term united places where gatherings of youth activists took place. Radical changes in society, and even the strong winds coming from the West, could not destroy the desire of the younger generation to participate in the life of their country. In different regions, such events differed in format and composition of participants, although everywhere the program was almost the same. Discussions on exciting topics and exchange of experience. Of course, the main part was announced by concerts, hikes, incendiary discos. William studied at the last year of radio technical school. The young man proved himself with a positive side not only in studies, but also in social life. And he was not surprised when he was summoned to the director of the educational institution, Benjamin, whom the students called a hat for his fondness for headgear, without raising his eyes from the papers, said, "Listen. Not in the service, but in friendship to get away for a week at the meeting of youth activists." This offer was so unexpected that the guy was numb at first and only then began to refuse. "Benjamin, I'm graduating in a month. Is there no one else to send but me?" "Trust me, William, there's no one else. You're the pride of our school, and you're the only one the administration can entrust with a mission of great responsibility." Although it was nice to get in, the young man was trying to assert his right to choose. "But I had other plans. If you'd been warned earlier, and now you're just coming out of nowhere." "William, I didn't expect it myself. Just today they gave me this oath and this order." Benjamin grabbed a piece of paper from the table and shook it in William's face. "I've been getting these orders for years. The country's on a new course, and we can't get rid of bureaucracy." William grasped the last argument as if it were a lifeline. "But you can just say no. Say we don't have any good candidates. They're all losers and truants." The principal's eyes slowly popped out of his orbits. "Do you think you're saying that if I do something like that, I'll be immediately revered, and the technical school will be closed? What do you say you go away for a week? You'll make new friends in the woods. After all, maybe at this camp you will meet the girl of your dreams." William thought it was bad enough that the director had gotten to his dreams. He squeezed out, "Okay, you've talked me into going to your camp." A real scandal awaited William at home when he informed his parents about the upcoming trip. Nancy lashed out at her son. "William, are you out of your mind? Or is this just a temporary thing? Your brother's wedding is on Saturday and you're off to some dubious camp? Mom, calm down. I'm sure the wedding will go on properly without my involvement. But Jacob will be offended. I'll talk to him, and he'll understand." Nancy retreated for an entire evening while she and her son packed for the road, rumbled William. "You can't let your family down. After all, you have no one closer than family, No friend can replace your family. The woman repeated approximately the same text for several hours, which threw the head of the family off balance. Nena, you're gonna be a fly. My ears are ringing. The woman immediately parried. Yes, I've long had all of you not only in my head ringing, but also ghosts at night. You do better as a father to your son. Nina William isn't old enough to tell him what to do, so stop pressuring the kid. What's he supposed to do at a wedding? Look at drunken faces. Leo distracted his wife, drawing the fire of her displeasure on himself. The woman immediately switched gears. You don't like drunken faces. That's what you call your relatives. They'll be so happy when they find out how you feel about them. Nena, they won't know if you don't tell them, but you've got a tongue like a broomstick. You're better off not talking than talking sometimes. That's right, shut me up. I'm always telling the truth, by the way. You're just hiding behind pretty words. If you're disgusted by the mere sight of new relatives, then why even organize such events? The man shrugged his shoulders in surprise. I don't know why. You have a fuse burning in one place all the time. You want us to be your neighbors or your workmates. You, Nancy, you're trying to prove to everyone that you're tough. The woman didn't expect that her desire for truthful information would turn against her. She looked at her husband with an unkind look, and William realized that his father was going to have a hard time. But he could not interfere in the dispute between his parents, because in their family such liberty was not allowed. He took the opportunity to slip out of the apartment quietly. All evening he walked with Molly and his classmate. The girl had long sympathized with William, and he also tried to answer her in the same spirit. When Molly learned of his imminent departure, she was greatly saddened. William, you invited me to your brother's wedding, and I made a new dress for the occasion. Now all the girls are going to laugh at me. The girl's eyes glistened suspiciously. But the young man did not pay any attention to it and asked cheerfully, Why will they laugh at your dress? Molly threw off her jacket from her shoulders, which the young man carefully threw on her at the beginning of the walk. The girl angrily began to press her heels into the asphalt winds, saying, No, they'll laugh at me because I'm dating an idiot like you, William. I never want to see you again. For more convincing, the slender cutter turned on her high heels, but apparently she miscalculated her strength and barely stayed on her feet. From the outside, her prank looked comical, and the young man could not help laughing. Tonya, you'd better be careful, or she'll break her forehead. Take care of yourself, boy. The heels bored down the road, and William stared at his girlfriend in the trail. At first, he wanted to catch up with the thin one, and even apologize to her. But looking under his feet, the boy realized that the ruined jacket was of more value to him than the incomprehensible relationship with his classmate. You can't even talk to her after that, and yet she pretends to be a refined nature, but in reality a primitive boor. William picked up his jacket and tried to make a quick assessment of the damage. What am I supposed to wear to this camp now? My mother will see me and kill me. Lucky me. There was no one home. So he charged his newly purchased washing machine with a lot of useful functions. It only took half an hour to tidy up an important piece of his closet. That night, William fell asleep with a blissful smile on his lips. He had already resigned himself to the fact that he would have to take care of his school alone again. The upcoming trip had seemed like a ticket to an unknown future for the 17-year-old. In fact, that's exactly what happened in reality. The organizers chose a very good place for the meeting. The lake in the heart of the forest area and pine and odor-soaked air. From the first minutes of staying in this place caused an incomparable feeling. And the camp itself, contrary to the expectations of most of the participants, seeing these rows of tents, was located in several well-appointed buildings, a recreation center, and a large metropolitan enterprise. It was on this circumstance that the head of the camp emphasized during his speech. Dear guests, I confess, at first I wanted to address you fatherly and call you guys, but when I saw your spiritualized faces, I realized that I should communicate with you as equals in age. After all, each of you has already managed to achieve his own success, albeit a small one. And here in this picturesque corner, you all together will be able to outline the main milestones on the way to the future. I would like to note separately that this gathering of young enthusiasts would not have taken place without the help of our sponsors. Our famous giant provided us with its recreation center. Let us thank our senior comrades for such substantial support. The first meeting was held on the lawn near the main building and after the words of the chief. The youth began to clap their hands in unison. The speaker waited for a pause and continued. But this is not all good news. In addition to free accommodation in comfortable rooms, each of you receives a memorable gift, all piled up near the improvised tribune of a small gazebo in the center of the lawn. So the chief had to ask the youth to line up in a single line. Somebody made a joke about it. That's the whole freedom thing. And in the first few minutes, we were all lined up. William didn't hold back, but it's much better than chaos. I don't agree. There are benefits to the chaotic movement of electrons, for example. This chaos gives birth to energy. William decided not to mess with the guy, whose appearance gave him away as a metropolitan Philistine. Suddenly, however, a 6'2" big man entered the verbal duel. He gave the upstart a contemptuous glance, and with undisguised defiance. He asked, "Where did you come from so smart?" He smelled the smell of fried food and hurried to change location. A cheerful and girlish voice sounded nearby. That's quite a lesson for a bunny. Perhaps force is a more effective argument than intelligence. William was not tall, though he had a sturdy build. But he was surprised to find the author of the striking statement beside him. The girl was so fragile and small that he involuntarily burst out a real Thumbelina. He immediately reared back, afraid that the girl would be offended by such a comparison, but she laughed. A direct hit. Everyone called me Thumbelina from childhood, even my parents. That's why I got used to it long ago and even consider it a compliment. While the young man was thinking hard, the girl first introduced herself. "Helen, I study at the Technical School of Light Industry. I'm graduating this year." William shook the miniature palm. "William, I am a radio technician graduating in a month." The girl flapped her thickly painted eyelashes. "That's great. And I'm a total zero in technology. I can't even fix an iron." The young man laughed. "I'm not a master of iron, or rather, I studied radio electronics." Helen nicely shrugged her shoulders. "Both irons and radios are the same to me, because I'm a complete proficient." My physics teacher almost cried when he tried to explain the basic laws to me. William was about to offer a new acquaintance his services in the field of knowledge. A middle-aged lady appeared out of nowhere and asked young people in a menacing voice, "You will still have plenty of time for chatter. And now with your unworthy behavior you bring resonance to the event." They looked at each other and adopted serious facial expressions. The awarding of personal prizes from the sponsor dragged on for a good 10 minutes, so those waiting for their turn began to yawn, and some left the lawn with the words, "Let's go anyway, there is nothing to catch here." They'll give out notebooks and felt-tip pen sets. That's the best-case scenario. Helen and William had a long laugh when they finally received their packages. Inside was the standard office set of a notepad and a set of auto pens. The girl shot back. This kit was missing an eraser and paper clips. William decided to be humorous too, and a pencil case would be nice. That would be a first-grade kit. Loaded with good cheer, the couple went to the dining room of the main building, where a festive lunch was waiting for all the participants. It was not necessary to persuade the young people, and soon they all pounced on the food. A long-haired brute, frightened by the mere sight of the capital's clever man, crawled out of the dining room into the hall with a satisfied look. "I'm ready to stay here for a whole month, if every day will be such soup." Helen could not pass by without a sharp word to such a colorful character. This fellow probably wins gluttony contests. On City Day, we also decided to organize a pizza-eating contest. So the winner was almost pumped up in the hospital. We also wanted to do something similar, but people did not go. Personally, I think it's wild such contests, and in our neighborhood such ideas are doomed to failure. I think it's fun. After all, in many countries such competitions are held. We have many of our own traditions, which are almost gone into oblivion. By the way, in the olden days, the master hired appetite workers, tended the table, and watched how he ate. If the man ate, a lot of such was taken. It was believed that such a laborer would work well. Helen was surprised. It turns out you're not only good at electronics. I'm trying to develop comprehensively. All week, the young people practically did not differ. They went camping together as a small team and took part in a cooking contest at the discos that took place every day on the outdoor dance floor. They were always together, too. The smart guy who distinguished himself on the day of arrival tried to approach Helen, but she immediately rejected his advances. His wounded ego made the boy go for a new meanness. During the farewell sit-downs around the campfire, he announced in a loud voice, "Guys, after a week's rest in this camp, some will return home, overflowing with emotions, and others will not come in twos and threes." Someone decided to add fuel to the fire and asked, "Talk to her. Who's XY?" The guy became obnoxiously flexible while pointing his finger at Helen and William. Of course, William couldn't stand such taunts, and without warning he punched him in the face. He fell to the ground and grabbed his nose. "Everyone saw me, but he broke it. I'll have you burned in jail. Do you know who my father is?" The big guy gave the kid a scornful look. "Don't be scared, man. Nobody's scared of you or your daddy. You got yourself in trouble. That's how you get your ass kicked." Somebody did report the incident to the camp commander. He rushed over and started an emergency investigation. He tried to find out the circumstances of the incident, but found no witnesses. Not wanting to lose face in front of the youth chief vacation sternness, which in no way connected with his image of a mass entertainer, said, "I still established the identity of the attacker. And you can be sure that this man will definitely be punished." The chief took a long look around the crowd and, without saying anything else, left. The young people also began to slowly disperse to their places. This ugly incident completely crossed out the impression of the vacation. An anxiety crept into William's soul that he might indeed be in big trouble before he received his diploma. Under the pressure of these worries, he could not even say goodbye to Helen and forgot to ask her for her phone number. It was only when he got home that William realized that this petite girl was very much in his heart. For the first week, he tried not to think about Helen and even resumed his meetings with Molly. But then he realized that he had to find the one who occupied all his thoughts. Having received his diplomas along with the direction to the first place of work, the guy went not home, but to the city where Helen lived. Since the address of his camp buddy was unknown to him, he decided to make inquiries at the technical school where she was studying in the reception area of the educational institution. He was not greeted in a friendly manner by a lady with a bitterness on her head. "Young man, we do not give information about our students. How do I know what's on your mind? Maybe you're a criminal?" Sharp eyes took in William's face, and he settled on her, but not the affable demeanor. The ladies didn't make him back down from his intended goal. The visitors added a pitiful note to her voice. "Well, please tell me at least in what neighborhood does live. I really need to see her. You see, we were in the camp together, and Helen lost something there, and I want to return it to her." Auntie laughed bitterly, unexpectedly. "What fantasists? She lost it. He found it. How touching. I'm going to cry." The woman took a breath and practically commanded to leave your find with me, and I'll pass it on at the first opportunity. I can't give you a home address. William realized that he would not be able to persuade this fury and headed for the exit. But the lady suddenly let him through very quickly. "Boy, where are you going?" Gave up so fast, he stopped. "I'm gonna look around town. Maybe I'll get lucky and meet her. That's a long walk. There are almost 200,000 people in this town. Tell me honestly, how much did you like our Helen?" William made a pained, sick expression on his face. "Believe me, I can't sleep for a month." The aunt looked around. "All right, I'll tell you how to find Helen. She's interning now at 3 cottage factories as a shift foreman. She was put on as a tryout. But I don't know her schedule, so you'll have to go find out for yourself." William was overwhelmed with emotion, and he hugged the woman in gratitude. "Thank you." The lady smiled and whispered, "What if they have true love? I don't want to interfere with happiness." The young man easily found the right businesses and set up a surveillance post near the entrance. Lines of women came in and out, but Helen was not among them. Only close to midnight 3 girls were pushed out of the passageway. and he recognized her at once. Helen Thumbelina. The girl froze in fright and looked around. William came out of his hiding place. I've been waiting for you here for almost 8 hours. I'm on the second shift. How did you find me anyway? Helen spoke as if they'd never been apart. And this openness of the girl made their communication relaxed and pleasant. He told in pictures about his visit to the technical school and the conversation with the lady with the old-fashioned hairstyle. Helen laughed heartily. These are our moms, a wonderful lady who takes care of everyone. She doesn't have kids of her own, so she pours all her love into the students. The real name of this bright young thing is Sophia. You must have made quite an impression on her if she gave in to your request. I have to admit, you really surprised me. You know, I didn't expect myself to do that. I just wanted to see you so badly, and you didn't leave your coordinates. You didn't ask for it. You just jumped on the bus and you're out of here. I was still under the impression of that unpleasant scene at the campfire. The girl laughed out loud. I gave that asshole a good kicking too. He pretends to be such a tough guy. He turned out to be a coward. I hate guys who try to play heroes. In reality, they just hide in the bushes at the first sign of trouble. I hope I'm a hero in your eyes. Helen laughed. The hero is a hero. Where are you staying? Where are you staying tonight? William was not prepared for such a question and was confused during his watch at the gatehouse. He hadn't thought about sleeping over, so he said the first thing that came into his head. Don't worry, I'm at the station. I'll go to the factory in the morning. I was sent to the Horizon. Helen shook her head. You sure got lucky with your placement. Jacob, not so much, so I suggest another option. At that time, they just approached the 5-star building where the girl lived. Helen raised her head. Probably Mom is not sleeping. She is always waiting for me from work worried. William realized what the girlfriend was hinting at and wanted to hurriedly hide. Helen, please don't. I can imagine how it would look from the outside. I'd rather sit at the station. But the girl had a dead grip on him. William had better not resist. I have normal parents. They're beasts. The girl's mom met them in the hallway and looked at her daughter and her companion Helen with surprise. It's already 1:30 at night. It's too late to receive guests. The girl poked her mother on the cheek. Mom, William is not a guest, but the best companion. Remember I told you about the camp? The woman nodded her head intensely. A light gleamed in her eyes. Joy at this moment showed itself to the stepfather of the girl Helen. You can't be without adventure. The girl thought William had nowhere to spend the night. I cannot leave a friend in a difficult situation. And then everyone can find themselves in such a position. You yourself taught me that people should help each other. Stepfather waved his hand, as if to summarize the line enough of your chirping. Maria will wake up caught on the mezzanine. Just try not to make any noise. I have to be up at 600 am. Wendy helped her daughter with the naughty cot and said goodnight to her guest. William was experiencing considerable discomfort, though. The fatigue was stronger. The guest did not hear his host cautiously sneak into the kitchen in the morning to warm the kettle. It was not until almost noon that he himself was awakened with difficulty by Helen. Get up. One can sleep through everything in the world that way. He jumped up sharply, and his movement made the cot fold up. It looked comical, but the boy was not laughing. Disaster. I was supposed to be at the factory by 9 o'clock today. I had to screw it up on the very first day. The girl suddenly suggested, William, I'll go with you. Aunt Kelly's stepdad's own sister works on the Horizon in human resources. I am sure she will help to solve all misunderstandings if they arise. The young specialist was welcomed cordially, and no one asked him unnecessary questions. The company had several subsidiary divisions, and William feared that he might be sent to another city. But Helen's relative denied this issue as well. When the formalities were over, the young people decided to take a walk around the city. William could not believe that everything was happening to him in reality and not in a dream. Helen, you are a natural magician. How do you do everything so cleverly? The girl laughed. I guess it's because I'm small and I'm embarrassed to refuse. By the way, I and at school, and now at work to settle conflicts. But goodness is punishable. You know that. The girl sighed heavily. I know William, but I can't help it. I'm always drawn even to places where I can get my ass kicked. Well, I was born this way. He's always scolding me too. He says my courage might play tricks on me. I see you have a good relationship with him. The girl walked on in silence for a while, then stopped. William, come and sit down. Helen's voice no longer had the cheerful notes that the young man liked so much. It was not difficult to guess from the girl's tense expression that she was trying to decide an important question for herself. William realized that it was not worth pressing her and waited for Helen to speak. And he chose the right tactic, because the girl began her story slowly and with frequent stops. I was only 9 months old when my father died. Cases seemingly trivial such every day happens just one drunken daredevil in rush hour rushed along the road in the center of the city and provoked a serious accident. My dad was in it for a month. He was driving his boss home. The amazing thing is that his boss only got a few scratches, and my dad had a fracture at the base of his skull. He died in the ambulance, and he was only 23 years old. My mom told me this story when I was in 8th grade. Until then, I thought Alex was my dad. You know, I can't call him stepfather, because he really replaced my father and adopted me right away. But my mom decided to keep my dead dad's last name. She's a fighter for justice too. You're really lucky, your dad. My dad and I can talk about anything. I'd even trust him with my secrets. Some things you can't tell my mom because she can't keep a secret. My dad won't give anything away. My mom likes to gossip too. She and my dad are always fighting about it. It would be interesting to meet your parents. Helen said this phrase with the obvious expectation that the subject would be continued. But William immediately turned his attention elsewhere. Listen, Helen, it seems to me that fate itself creates favorable conditions for you and me. I'm not a fatalist and I don't believe in such theories. The explanation is simple. Two people who are close in spirit meet one day, and a bond forms between them. Some people call it magnetism. In short, they're drawn to each other, and they try to be together. William took Helen's hands in his and asked quietly, "We already have such a bond between us." The girl looked into his eyes and immediately averted her gaze, because there was something special in William's gaze that made her heart race. The girl quietly mumbled, "I haven't figured it out yet." It wasn't a confession yet, but their relationship could no longer be called friendship. They looked forward to each new meeting and still chatted about different topics. But words mattered much less than looks, gestures, and sighs. For almost a year, William had managed to hide from his parents that he had a girlfriend. Helen hinted a few more times that she was eager to meet the parents of the guy she hoped to marry. They were both only 18. William didn't want to rush things. But Helen, like any girl, dreamed of a wedding dress and a lavish celebration. There was another reason that made the young man avoid discussing their future together. And this obstacle was Nancy, that is, William's own mother. He knew in advance how she would take the news of her son's early marriage. When the news was announced to his parents by his elder brother, Mother shouted at the whole entrance, "Are you so impatient that you're ready to marry the first girl in your mold?" After all, no face, no skin their future. Oleg could not bear to criticize his fiancée and sassed his mother. "According to you, normal girls are those who like you way more than a centimeter." But on Nancy, such criticism did not make an impression, because her main dignity she considered the impressive size of her figure. She responded to her son's open rudeness by thrusting her chin upward. A real woman fullness does not spoil, but adds charm. It's my individual zest. Nancy applied her beauty scale to all of her son's potential brides. And the bench alone, in her opinion, deserved the highest score. She's a good-looking girl, and she's got everything in place. William would come with the army and marry her. But Jacob was unlucky. Betty, smart though she was, she made it as a teacher. But she doesn't look the part. That's what William's mother always thought. That's why he was terrified of introducing her to Helen. He really didn't want his parent to apply her own standards to her chosen one. But ironically, this process was hastened by a summons to the military recruitment office. Nancy called her son one day in the middle of the week. "Son, come quickly, or you'll be in trouble." William excused himself from work and went to his district center, where he was registered. He still counted on a deferment, but after the medical commission, the commissioner informed him that William would go to serve in the Navy. It seemed to the boy that his soul went into a tizzy, but he didn't show it. When he arrived home, he told his parents from the doorstep that I would be serving in Kaliningrad. And that's a long story. So I decided to get married before I shipped out. The parents collapsed on the couch almost simultaneously, and Nancy clutched at her heart. What are you talking about? What marriage? We could get married every year after we served. But William said in a tone of voice that brooked no objection, "No, Helen and I have to get married before we ship out. Son, but we haven't got the money for a wedding. You know what the country's like now, don't you? Dad's going to be laid off in the fall. They've already given notice, and my own factory. It's about to close. Mom, we don't need a wedding. We'll quietly sign everything and everything. But Helen can come and visit me anytime she wants." Nancy held her hands up to the ceiling and in a voice that made me cry. I wanted to cry and asked who is this Helen that my son has lost his head over. 2 days later, William presented his bride to his parents. Nancy, seeing the guest, covered her mouth with the palm of her hand and whispered, "God, how tiny you are, William. At least your bride is 18. Do her parents know you've decided to get married?" The questions came one after another. The hostess kept her guest at the door. Leo was the first to realize it. "Mother, what are you doing here?" Nancy carefully pretended to be happy on her face. But it was noticeable that she had very different winds at heart. After dinner, she called her youngest son aside. "William, where are your eyes? Can't you see that your Helen has a long nose and a neck like a goose, and she's not very pretty at all?" "Yeah." The young man looked unkindly at his mother. "Mom, and one more word, and I'll leave this house and never come back. I love this girl, and I ask that you treat her with respect." Nancy pressed her lips together resentfully and muttered, "Since it's dearer to you to grieve than your mother, it's up to you. Only then you can blame yourself." 2 days before the training camp, the young men signed their names. This is an important event. They celebrated modestly in the circle of their closest relatives. William warmly remembered those 2 wonderful days they had spent together with Helen. There were no other such days in his life. Stories from his past life were changing like images in a movie, and he did not notice how he arrived at his destination. The man decided to make a stop at the store at the entrance to the city, because he went on the road without breakfast. He got out of the car and remembered that he forgot to alert the clientele. About his arrival in the cell phone directory, he quickly found the right number. "Hello, this is Detective William. We had a deal, yes. I'm in town in about half an hour." He turned off his cell phone and asked himself a question. "Interesting lady won't tell me what make her come to me. Says she'll tell me when she sees me. Yeah, everyone's got their own cockroaches." He took a leisurely snack at Terry's Cafe and drank 2 cups of strong coffee and a drink with a stream of energy. Got angry with the hanged man, and my mood improved noticeably. Now I'm ready to dig the ground with my nose like a real bloodhound. William quickly found the right house and took the elevator to the 7th floor of the house in the new neighborhood. While the elevator was smoothly going up, the man had time to think. Probably the elite live in this house. Downstairs concierge and video surveillance system installed, not heavy. Impressed private detective and interiors inside the entrance. Everywhere reigned perfect cleanliness, and everywhere greenery, 8 indoor plants. William stepped out of the elevator, but did not immediately ring the doorbell, which bore a sign with the number 61. First, there was a brisk clatter of heels, and then a painfully familiar voice said, "I'm coming, I'm opening the door." This voice could not be confused with any other voice. But in William's soul there was hope that he was mistaken. The door opened, and he saw her. He immediately felt stuffy and began to gulp for air. How had she smiled that unique smile, though she expected to see someone else? Didn't he recognize my voice on the phone? No, the phone distorts the timbre. Did you arrange this meeting on purpose? She looked at him with a grin. "William, you think too highly of yourself, although you always have been. What happened in the past? I died a long time ago. I brought you in as an expert. I read the comments. People say you're a master detective. Come on in. Don't just stand in the doorway." He followed her obediently, trying to memorize her route. "That's quite an apartment you got there. Status requires it. I've been promoted to director myself, and my husband is always out in public. He heads the deputy corps of our region." The guest stretched out O. "And what happened to such influential persons?" "The eldest daughter disappeared. More precisely, she ran away." He raised an eyebrow. "And you also have a younger daughter?" She smiled again. "We have 2 daughters and a son. He is the youngest in the family." He looked at her and couldn't believe what she was saying. "The children are adopted." Helen laughed. "Why adoptive of their own? The doctor's verdict was wrong. And yet I was a happy mom. All right, let's get down to business. We'll do the nostalgic reminiscing later. That is, of course, if you still want to." Helen briefly recounted her daughter's elopement from home. And at the end, William added, "I have some guesses, but I don't know how you take this information. The thing is, until about 6 months ago, I happened to check out Lisa's Facebook page and learned that she was looking for a guy named Russell. Yeah, but that bad feeling went down my throat." And William tore into town with his shirt on. The buttons clinked on the mirrored surface of the miniature table. The first wife asked with concern in her voice, "Are you feeling ill? Maybe some water?" He shook his head negatively, and there was no need to worry. "There is nothing wrong with me." Helen looked at him carefully, and a hunch struck her. "William, have you really given up on Sam?" The man took his eyes aside. "Yes, it happened, unfortunately. We only lived for 5 years, and then we divorced. Her father is a real usurper, and I'm tired of his dictatorship. You don't have to go on. So you ran away from your second wife, too. I'm not really interested in your personal life. It's just that there are certain coincidences in this whole story." So, with a little thought, "I came to the conclusion that my daughter's escape has something to do with your son, and it will be easier for you to solve this case without publicity. My husband wants to run for mayor, and Lisa's antics could have a negative impact on his reputation. Helen, you don't have to explain. I understand. I'll try to help, but it won't be easy. Is there a problem?" "Yes, I've only seen my son twice since the divorce, and then secretly. My father-in-law vetoed our visits. There was nothing more to talk about." And Helen got out of her chair first. The private detective fidgeted too, and for some reason repeated again, "I'll do my best. That's what I hope." At the door, he turned around as if he wanted to memorize her appearance, but Helen looked away. "Let's keep in touch by phone. It's better for both of us. If you're okay with that algorithm, I'm fine with it." The door slammed shut for a moment, a fleet moonplate gleamed. William headed for the elevator. He felt utterly devastated, as if a fire had recently raged inside him and all living things had burned out, leaving smoking ashes. He said in a low voice, because it could have been different. The elevator silently opened its doors, and the man pressed the number 1 button. Helen spent the rest of the day under the impression of her meeting with her ex-husband. Barely had she closed the door behind her guest as a sudden weakness told her arms and legs. She had no strength to take even a step, and she leaned against the door of consciousness. The thought pierced, and after all it could have been different, if only what if what? It was a question the woman had not found an answer to for 20 years. Perhaps the mutilated first love had been her fault. Helen immediately understood what did not like the mother of the groom, but she, as usual, took the situation with humor. "William, I don't think I've come to the right place. Nancy didn't even try to hide it." The guy himself was upset by such a cold reception of his future wife, and did not begin to justify his parents, but only muttered, "My mother's opinion does not matter. In the future, I will try to make sure that you meet as little as possible. This is a promise." William diligently fulfilled all the 5 years they lived together. Of course, the years of service in the Navy had to be subtracted from this period. The young people had given up on getting married, deciding that dressing up was more important when the bustle of the noisy conscript send-off had died down a bit. Helen had become very homesick. Wendy tried to reassure her daughter Helen, "You won't notice how quickly time will fly by and your William will return. Find interesting activities for yourself and switch." Alexei Alexievich didn't like his wife's advice. Wendy, do you realize what you're saying? You're setting your daughter on the path of sin. The woman took offense at her husband. If you're so smart, why don't you tell me what to do? Helen, my school is strong. And about hints, I can say one thing: any woman should wait patiently for her husband. You see, William didn't go to a party, he went on duty. You should write to him more often, call him more often. And if you visit him there on the spot, it'll be a real holiday for the boy. The girl took her stepfather's last advice as a guide to action. She took an extra part-time job to earn money for the road and presents for her beloved. In addition, Helen helped her mother, who worked at the kindergarten. Kitchen workers. The first trip was timed to coincide with the taking of the oath by the new recruits. The company of the young wife was made by her husband's parents and brother. Helen did not expect them to go as a whole team. But William was very happy to see such a delegation. That trip was marred by the fact that her husband's relatives did not calculate their money, and Helen had to buy them tickets for the return trip. Her mother-in-law, instead of thanking her, dryly remarked that nothing would be lost from you and you would earn more. And Helen worked without weekends again. But the first bitter experience helped her not to make such mistakes in the future, and she no longer warned her parents and husband about her trips. During the visit, William was given a leave of absence for 24 hours, and Helen booked hotel rooms in advance. For the young woman, the time spent together with her husband was priceless. She very much hoped that during one of these meetings she became pregnant and a baby would come into the family. But good luck passed. One day the mother-in-law mercilessly went through the roller on the daughter-in-law. "Helen, you're all idle. You should check it out. Maybe there's something wrong with your womanhood." The young woman had nothing to say to this attack. Gradually, she became more and more distant from her husband's relatives, to which the mother-in-law complained to her son. If earlier William supported the side of the wife, later he began to convince Helen that she should make efforts to maintain good relations with her mother-in-law. On Nancy did not work, as she put it, maneuvers, daughters-in-law, and the relatives began to visit regularly themselves, and usually such visits were unannounced. Wendy often lamented this. God has given us relatives. In a little while we would have to change our place of residence. My husband tried to defend his parents for these ideas. You'd think you'd have a solid lineage. Well, it's just that our saints have a slightly different upbringing. Yeah, especially Nancy. She's so smart. And manners like a bizarre girl poking everyone. And to her name, she always adds KLX. It's that kind of impudence that pisses me off the most, Wendy. You have to be able to forgive people their little flaws. Nancy is just a very direct and open person. And you can't forget that she grew up in a very different environment. Alex, but there's a limit to everything, and not everything can be blamed on faulty upbringing. Do you even know that you have declared yourself holier than our Helen? The man shrugged his shoulders, which expressed his confusion. But Wendy never managed to tell her husband the insolence of her relative because of Helen's own interference. "Mom, please don't wash my new in-law's bones in my presence. And you too are defending that fat fury." The girl looked at her mother with judgment. "Mom, the last thing you want to do is stoop to direct insults. By the way, you need to lose some weight yourself." This remark finally pissed off the normally calm Wendy. "I'm done enjoying my mother-in-law's company, and I wash my hands of it." Alex winked at his daughter, but did it in such a way that his spouse did not notice. When the woman in upset feelings went to the kitchen, he said, "You and the mother do not take offense, but in some ways she is really right. I know from my own experience that you cannot let your opponent sit on your head. And your main opponent, Nancy, try to put her in her place at least once, but do it culturally. Thanks, Dad, you're my best friend." What did the girl do to her father? And with a good mood went to the kitchen to help her mother. Soon, her father's advice came in handy. It is not known from what source her husband's parents learned about her upcoming trip to Kaliningrad. Her mother-in-law made her happy with a call, and without an approach proceeded to the main thing. "Helen, William's birthday is coming up, and that my father and I also want to congratulate him on the spot." The girl immediately realized where the mother-in-law was going, but did not reveal herself. "That's your right, but this has nothing to do with me." At the other end, there were sounds reminiscent of grunting, not Helen, that you're a fool, you're pretending. We have to go, and we're short of money. We're out of work, Nancy. What's that got to do with me? The daughter-in-law's repeated question finally pissed off her mother-in-law. She yelled into the phone. Can't you see you've got all sorts of things going on in there? You three work, and we are a disaster in this backwater. So instead of helping your relatives, you ask stupid questions. Helen didn't want to continue the conversation any longer and hung up the phone. But it wasn't so easy to get rid of her mother-in-law. The Nancy had been pestering them with calls all evening. And to get rid of her, Wendy had promised to subsidize some of her travel expenses. The mother-in-law took the money, but she wasn't going to pay it back. Wendy wanted to hint this fact to her when they met. But her husband restrained her. Wendy, take care of your nerves. We're not going to rally by losing a few hundred. All right, Alex, I'll listen to you. But next time I won't give them another penny. I'm getting close. William's due date. Helen felt little wings cutting behind her back. She was already envisioning a happy family life with a separate apartment and a bunch of babies. The young woman was sure that she and her husband would have no problems in this respect. She carefully prepared for William's return and bought him a lot of fashionable things, spending all her savings. The young man was pleased with the gift and immediately began to try on the cover. All the things fit, except for the sneakers. He smiled guiltily at Helen. I think my feet have grown a lot. Don't worry about it. I'll wear the old ones. For example, to the old shoes also showed a negative result. The couple had a little laugh. William said confidently, I'll call my people. I'll ask them to send some as humanitarian aid. Helen did not hear the whole conversation between her husband and her mother-in-law, but she only caught William's last sentence. Thank you, Mother. I understand everything, and I will never ask you for anything again. She understood and didn't ask him any more unnecessary questions. William, don't be upset. We'll buy you something modest. I'd borrowed the money from my family. Wendy took out her purse without words and gave her daughter the necessary amount within an hour. The shoe issue was successfully resolved, and the couple celebrated a small common victory, but the mood was spoiled by Nancy. She called late in the evening and began to reprimand her daughter-in-law. Helen, why are you turning my son against his parents? It was unexpected, and the girl did not know what to answer to such accusations. The mother-in-law took advantage of her confusion and continued in the same spirit. So, my dear, what I want to tell you. If you want to have a husband on your side, you're on your own. Nancy, but William, your son, and I thought you'd be happy to help him, she thought. It's the son who should be helping us, not us helping him. The man watched his wife and was silent. Only before going to bed he said, Helen, don't take offense at your mother. It's just the way she is, and I can't change that. Very quickly, Helen realized that a lot had changed in a very short time. There was a clear change in her husband's character after he came home. It was no longer the same in him. Excitement knew race, as in his youth. He began to nag her on various household trifles. But most of all, women were alarmed that her husband was in no hurry to get a job. He categorically refused to return to the horizon, where they were waiting for him. Toward the fall, William shocked her with the news. Helen, I've decided to enter the Academy of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Sam, you must remember him. We served together. Yeah, I remember that guy. And that you're Sam. His father is the chief of criminal investigation. He said he'd help us get into one of those schools, the first place they put guys after the service. So we have a good chance of getting in. Helen couldn't fully digest the information she had received and asked, Are you going to enroll as a correspondence student? William laughed merrily. No, Helen. There are no correspondence courses in such institutions, and they have a very strict, almost barracks-like regime. Tears rolled down from the girl's eyes. So I'll be waiting for you again and coming to you for short dates. A shadow of discontent ran across William's face. Helen, and I'm not forcing you. If you don't like it, you can file for divorce. But this is my future we're talking about, and I don't want to miss maybe my only chance. She remembers how then for the first time this unpleasant word divorce cut her hearing, and in her heart closed the fear that William could leave her. The young woman intuitively felt that keeping the family together would be helped by having a child. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get pregnant. She went around all the doctors, but never heard from them a single opinion. Some found a bunch of hidden pathologies that prevented conception, while others claimed that she was perfectly healthy. The days dragged on in a dreary string. After work, Helen would return to the empty apartment that her grandmother had signed over to her before she died. She dreamed of creating a family nest on these square meters. But with each passing day, this goal became more and more distant from her. Loneliness pressed so hard on the young woman that she developed a habit of crossing out the days she lived on the calendar. It took Wendy a long time to recover from the shock when she learned about her daughter's strange hobby. "Helen, you're going to go off the rails like that. He's throwing his dependence away. It's not all about your William. Why are you fixated on him?" "Mom, I love him, and I can't help it." Wendy sat down next to her daughter. "I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. Helen, don't take this the wrong way, but it's hard for me to watch you make yourself empty with the expectations of war. You've started crossing out the days like a prisoner in captivity. Don't you realize that your husband is just using you? And he's doing it brazenly." Helen was crying quietly. "Mom, what are you talking about, daughter? Take off your rose-colored glasses. You've been married almost 4 years. And what has your lovely husband done in that time?" "Well, he's done the right thing. Kudos to him. But a normal man tries to get back on his feet after the army. Yours is going to school, which means he's going to piss you off again, and you're going to clothe and shoe him. Helen, don't you hate being the tool in someone else's hands?" "Mom, he'll graduate. He'll get his rank." "Helen, by the time he graduates, you'll be 30 years old. And a woman's youth is short. I didn't want to tell you, but I have a bad feeling he'll leave you." Helen tried not to think about her mother's prediction, but many things spoke for the fact that her marriage was slowly disintegrating into small pieces. For the first 2 years, she herself traveled to the capital every month to deliver a transmission to her cadet. In the 3rd year, the regime softened. Their meetings already took place in a rented apartment. Later, William moved there for permanent residence and paid for his comfortable living. But the young woman did not lose optimism because her husband assured her, "Helen, be patient a little longer. Soon I will graduate, get a well-paid position, and we will live with you." After a short date, she would go home and reassure herself, "I'll be fine." Perhaps the belief in a better future played a bad trick on the woman. A few weeks after another date with her husband, she felt that something was wrong with her. Helen rushed to see a doctor she knew, and the doctor told her, "I can't be 100% sure yet, but by all accounts you're pregnant. Come back in a couple weeks for a follow-up exam." Happiness was building out of Helen's sunshine. The first thing she did was to tell William the happy news, but the father-to-be did not show much jubilation. He only asked Helen if it was certain. No doubt about it. Her husband advised her to be careful and not to take any unnecessary risks. "Helen, you have to take care of our baby now. I don't think you should be traveling like this." She was pleased that William cared for her. She stopped traveling to the capital for a while. 2 weeks later, Helen went to the consultation again, and the doctors examined her for a long time. "Helen, I will give you a referral for a new examination. It is a very accurate machine, but you will have to wait in line." The young woman signed up for ultrasound diagnostics. And in order not to waste time, she began to slowly prepare dowry for the future child. She knew about the omens, so she did not tell even her mother and younger sister about her secret. And the young woman calmed herself with these words, "All this superstition. One should take advantage of the moment and stock up on everything necessary, so as not to run around shopping later." Within a few weeks were bought diapers, dispositions, and even fur overalls for the baby. When the date of the examination came, Helen went to the appointment. She saw a different doctor who took a long time to move a small device on her abdomen. "Women, you're not pregnant." "No, I'm not." Helen began to list all the signs. The doctor listened calmly. "I'm sorry, but you don't have a pregnancy. You have a mass that's rapidly enlarging. Let's hope the tumors are high grade." Helen couldn't move her mind. Her dots bored out, and then everything went black. She woke up in the same office. The doctor was holding a grip of loss under her nose. "You scared us. You can't react like that." And her tongue was cotton candy. But Helen tried to make a point. "And you're telling me to laugh at this news? You shouldn't laugh, you should act. In your case, not everything is hopeless. And if you don't waste time, you will be able to bear and give birth to a child on your own in the future." For several days, she walked around like a fog. The doctor's conclusions completely overwhelmed her, and she did not know how to inform her husband about it. The woman never had time to do this, because a new misfortune fell on her family. Alex is dead. The man was returning home after work on his bicycle. He was hit by a dump truck driven by an inexperienced driver. The accident happened near the house. And Wendy was in a robe and slippers and ran to the stop where it all happened. She saw the crowd of onlookers and paramedics from afar and rushed through the cordon. "Let me in. That's my husband." Alex was conscious. When he saw his wife, he smiled and moved. "And worry, I'm a tough nut. Everything will be fine." The woman noticed a bloodstain slowly spreading around the man's head. The ambulance paramedic whispered open craniocerebral trauma. He was thrown back against a pole by the impact. Wendy screamed. "So what are you standing there for? Take him to the hospital. Save the man. It's no use. The injuries are incompatible. We're not getting him there." The woman bent over her dying husband. But he was already unconscious. William came to the funeral of his wife's father, but tried to act as if the trouble did not concern him. After the funeral ceremony, he hurried off at once. "I'm sorry, but I can't stay. I've only been released for a day." Wendy was surprised. Usually in cases like this, you get 3 days vacation. That's the law. The young man looked at her under the gaze of his wife's mother and muttered, "We have a different system." Helen decided to walk her husband to the bus station. On the way, they talked for a while. William wanted to demonstrate his involvement and advised his wife not to worry. "Helen, I realize how difficult it is for you, but try to hold on. After all, the health of our child depends on your condition." The woman looked at him with surprise. "I don't like your concern, but I must inform you that there was a problem with the pregnancy." He paused. "You mean like a false alarm? Women have that sometimes. Hormone disruption and other disorders in the early stages, very similar to pregnancy." "Helen, I expected my husband to react violently to this news because he so dreamed of an heir." But William looked indifferently at his wife and continued on his way. He did not even say the usual words of encouragement. Just before we left, William suddenly asked Helen, "Don't come to see me yet. I'm a mess. Internships start next week. They send me far away," although Helen was very much hurt by the callousness of her spouse. She kept calm and even with participation asked, "And more precisely, can you say where you will be?" He smiled cheerfully. "I can trust you with all the secrets. I will go to my neighborhood in my homeland." William was well aware that his wife would not dare to follow him, because that would mean a meeting with her mother-in-law. So he completely disappeared from his wife's living space for a month. Only once did the cadet call her to tell her that he was doing well. "Helen, I've got everyone blending in perfectly and learning the secrets of the trade at the same time. Soon I'll be a real detective, and novels will be written about me, even across several hundred kilometers." Helen saw how happy William was. She wished him luck and thought that he did not even ask how she lived without him. But a month later, her husband showed up unannounced. He was all agitated, and Helen anxiously asked William if everything was all right. He grinned nervously. "Is there something wrong with me? Why are you asking me such strange questions? You're twitching all over the place and acting all weird." He smirked again. "Yeah, there's a little bit of that. Helen, I have a huge favor to ask of you, and I'm listening. Do you remember Sam, your fellow officer?" "Of course I do. And what was his problem?" "Oh, nothing much. It's just that he's about to marry a girl who's expecting his child. And how can I help my friend and his fiancée?" William was nervous, though he tried hard to be calm, realizing that their finances were tight. "Sam is studying, and his girlfriend is also a teacher. So I thought that you and I could give them a small but useful gift. You were preparing a dowry for our baby. Helen physically felt several, and hunger sang in her heart at once. You don't have to go on. I hear you. All right, I'll get you everything. And I'll make it nice and quiet. Helen, don't bother. It's fine. But I'm in a hurry. I want to catch the last bus, my wife muttered grudgingly to William. You've got another strange thing going on lately that I'm very worried about. You're always in a hurry. He spread his hands in confusion. It's just that I'm not organized and I'm late a lot. A side effect, so to speak. A side effect from what else would be understandable if you were working and studying. But you live in comfort. It remains to study and enjoy life. So Helen put some newborn clothes in a big bag. After a moment's hesitation, she sent the fur overalls in there as well. William snatched the bag from her hands and said a hasty goodbye, ran to the bus station. It was her husband's haste that alarmed the woman most. She remembered her mother's predictions and decided to find out what was really going on. The next morning, she took the first flight to the capital. She did not tell her mother about her trip, and at work she had accumulated time off. She called the head of the shop, and she kindly treated the request of the best worker. Helen is settling her own affairs as well. If you need additional days, don't hesitate to call. We can work things out with you without statements or explanations. The young woman felt a sense of discomfort about halfway through the trip. She could not yet explain this unpleasant feeling, but she decided to behave carefully. Helen had her own keys to the rented apartment in her purse, and she had no problem getting into the dwelling, where her beloved spouse briefly, but from the first seconds she felt the presence of another woman. Her intuition did not fail her, and after a short tour of the apartment, the woman found in the bathroom in the most prominent place cosmetics and hairspray. In the bedroom, the bed was unmistakable, and on the back of the chair there were flowers and a robe. A hot wave rolled up to her throat, and it became hard to breathe. She rushed to the balcony to get a breath of fresh air. The front door slammed, and then came her husband's worried voice. Sam, are you back already? Why did you put a draft in the apartment? You could catch a cold. Helen came from the balcony. No, darling, it's not Sam. Did you make a mistake at this crucial moment? Helen was very much like Themis. She was standing in front of her husband, her head proudly tilted, and he was convulsively swallowing saliva. The brightness of the picture filled, and that caught by surprise husband like a chameleon, then pale, then blushed. Helen, how is it? Why didn't you warn me? Why should I warn you? By the way, I'm paying for this apartment, and you're making a mess of it. And please explain. Who's Sam? Or did your friend have a sex change? Helen, you've got to be kidding me. Don't worry about it. I'll explain everything. She tried her best to keep her composure, though a volcano was raging inside. Carelessly, sitting down on a chair, Helen ordered, "But why are you silent? Explain." The man began to circle around near the chair. Helen, this is how it sometimes happens that people love each other, but time passes and feelings fade. I see. You don't have to go any further. Suddenly, William took on an uptight tone. Helen, please don't be so short on offense. This is all your fault. You and I never made it as a family. Stacy's about to give me a son. That was a low blow. So that's who you took the baby stuff for. Your mistress? Don't you dare call her that. She's the mother of my child, and we're getting married. Shouldn't you leave now? I don't want Sam to see you. And green bunnies danced before the woman's eyes. She kicked the chair back with her foot. William, I don't care about your worries, and I don't care about your article either. And this apartment will have to be imitated. Not by me, by you. I'm gonna call the landlady, and she's gonna kick you out of here. No, Helen, you're the one who'll be out of here like a champagne cork. The argument between the couple might have turned violent if Sam hadn't shown up. The girl looked about 19. Her huge belly made her clumsy. She struggled to get into the room and looked at William with an innocent smile. Kitty, here we are. And who is this, your sister? The girl looked at Helen in surprise, who was looking for a ruder answer. But she did not have time to answer her rival because a gray-haired man of a rich man's physique came into the apartment. He immediately attacked Helen. Citizen, who are you? And why are you here? I'm the legal wife of this asshole. I can even show you my passport. The woman took the document out of her purse because William instantly turned pale. She realized that in front of her father of the pregnant girl, disgusting feeling overwhelmed her, and she ran out of the apartment. The father of the bride caught up with Helen at the elevator. "Did you forget your passport?" "Thank you." Helen doesn't remember how she got home. The shock was so strong that the next morning she could not get out of bed and had to call a doctor at home. For a few days, the young woman was haunted by a compulsive desire to leave this world, but she dreamed of her deceased father, Alex. He told her something long, but she did not remember anything from his monologue. But before he disappeared, he threatened her with his finger and very clearly said, "Helen, don't you dare. You're strong and you can handle this trouble." All this time, Wendy did not leave her daughter's side, as if she could sense what thoughts were crowding into her head. The mother comforted her daughter. "Believe me, everything will change, and there will be agony. And you will surely meet a good man. Your happiness will not pass by." And indeed, the pain, betrayal gradually began to subside. And then Helen met Mark. Her health improved too. She had an operation in a private clinic, and a year later became pregnant with her first husband. Helen didn't know anything. She had no desire to make inquiries about him. Only one day, Nancy showed up out of the blue. Her mother-in-law called her in the middle of the night and sneeringly declared, "My William, he's really happy now. He's got a wife like you. She's a teacher. You couldn't give birth. Stay. You gave us a grandson, such a clever boy. My father and I went to his christening yesterday. So many people were there." Helen asked in an indifferent voice, "And you decided to tell me about your son's happiness." "It was at night. Nancy," the tube picks up with a reply. But Helen beat her to it, "And I am infinitely glad that you have finally found happiness." She carefully placed the receiver on the machine, realizing that the last thread linking her to the past had been severed. Helen was brought back to reality by the voices of the children. Phil was the first to fly into the kitchen and climbed on his mother's lap as the youngest. "Mommy, they gave us such junk in the cafeteria today, so I'm hungry." Emily looked at her younger brother with contempt. "Mom, he's lying to you. The soup is fine and the second course is delicious. It's just that you and Dad spoiled him. Oh, I almost forgot. Lissa called me asking about you." Helen got worried when I asked her where she was after school, but she hung up right away. She just said she was fine and asked me not to look for her. She also said she was an adult and had a right to control her life. "Mom, what does that mean?" The woman let her daughter's question pass by and wrapped her arms around her head in excitement. "God, where does Emily carry her?" Sly squinted at her mom. "I'll tell you in confidence, only Daddy do not talk close to her boyfriend." "But where are they hiding?" "I don't know. They've been Facebooking. I peeked at his picture. He's pretty good looking, but he's got red hair. And I don't like redheads." Helen fought the urge to call William for a while, but then changed her mind, realizing that her call might be misunderstood by him. After all, she had nothing new to tell the private detective. William didn't think that meeting his ex-wife would make such a strong impression on him, did he? No, it was not just an emotional outburst, but a blow to the kidneys or another sensitive place. After all these years he had convinced himself that Helen would be lost without him. He had imagined many times that she was living in poverty or suffering from loneliness, but he'd never expected to see her happy and surrounded by a whole bunch of kids. The fact that his ex-wife had hired him, and now he was obliged to fulfill the order to let off a little steam. He picked up the pace and muttered, "It's okay, I'll get over it. It's actually kind of funny how it works out that way. This once small and insecure girl has surpassed me. Fate had a way of fooling around if it decided to bring us together again." William had to slow down when he got to the center of town. He hadn't yet decided where to begin his search for the runaway girl. Although as an experienced detective, he realized that the most reasonable thing to do in the current situation was to find the mysterious Russell first. The man could not believe that Helen's daughter could be somehow connected with his son. That's what he tried to convince himself. So what? So what if it's a rare name? It's fashionable to call children by old names nowadays. I used to make the same choice myself. William didn't like to travel to his past, but his memory against his will insistently returned. The day Helen discovered his infidelity. Even today, more than 20 years later, the man could not understand how he got into such a mess. But it all started innocently with a New Year's Eve ball. In the academy, there was a tradition, according to which all significant holidays were celebrated together with the sponsored. And this place of honor was given to the pedagogical university. William did not like such events, but one day Sam dragged him to such a party. "William, you're about to get bored. You need to lighten up a little. It's New Year's Eve, everybody expects miracles. Why don't you get one from the magic box?" William's been at it a long time. "Sam, we're long past the age of believing in fairy tales. And I'm the wife of that man, should not attend discos." My friend was even taken aback by such a request. "I can't believe I'm hearing this from you. Or are you going to become a monk?" "William, if you don't want to, nothing will happen. So no excuses are acceptable." And he gave in to his comrades' entreaties. They put on their dress uniforms and went together to the Departmental House of Culture. The evening was in full swing when Sam pulled him aside. "Listen, William, if you fall down, I'll introduce you to my full namesake." "No, you heard right. This girl's name is Sam, and she is, by the way, the daughter of the district CID chief. So you have a chance to get a powerful patron if you want to." William mumbled something dumbly, but obediently followed his comrade. The owner of the unusual name resembled a gray mouse. There was nothing memorable in the girl's appearance except for the local red hair. She was the first to invite him to a white dance and never once raised her eyes. Out of a sense of politeness, William, after a short pause, asked the girl to the next dance and then walked her all the way to the entrance. Everything seemed to be within the bounds of propriety. But a few days later, Sam at the end of class winked at him. "There's a young lady waiting for you downstairs." William rushed to the exit, thinking it was his wife who had decided to visit him off schedule, but saw the article the girl stammered and said that she was walking by chance and decided to stop by. The young man showed tact and offered her a walk. They talked about trifles, and he, between acceptable anecdotes and funny stories, as if unintentionally informed her that he was bound by the bonds of marriage. William hoped that this would scare the girl away, but she said nothing. The next day she came again. The situation was becoming unmanageable, and he decided to consult a friend. "Look, Sam, this is the first time I've been in this ambiguous position. I need your advice on how to handle this. If Helen finds out I have a groupie, she'll give me a hard time. I looked at my friend like he was a 5-year-old kid. You're asking stupid questions. If I was so lucky, I wouldn't hesitate to take that doll to the registry office. Sam, you know I'm married. A wife is not a wall. You can push it away for a while or make a reconstruction in your life and remove the interfering structures altogether." William stared at his friend, eyes bulging with amazement. "No, Sam, I don't want a divorce. I love my Helen, and she and I have such plans for the future." "William, you're unconvincing, but you're funny. Tell me who your Helen is, shift foreman. I'll grant you, it sounds impressive, but it has no substance. And zero perspective either. There's a whole supervisor of threats here. Imagine the career you could have." Sam had a knack for persuasion, which later had a positive effect on his career. He talked and talked and talked, not letting William get his head around it. By the end of the enlightening conversation, he had a different perspective on his marital status. "You're really talking to Helen. I'll never amount to anything in this life. Of course I love her, but those feelings don't last forever." William started dating a girl who was in love with him when he suggested that she come to visit him. Sam happily agreed. They first drank tea, and then everything happened by itself. Sam began to visit him in the evenings, and they spent several hours together. Then he would walk her home. Such an algorithm suited both parties, and the young man soon realized that such a life with a double bottom is even much more interesting than the role of a faithful husband. But it is known that trouble lurks around the corner of those who forget about caution. Thunder struck just before the end of third year. One day at tea time, his young lover said in a casual tone of voice, "William, we're going to have a baby soon, and I'm already 4 months pregnant." The light immediately faded in his eyes, because he imagined what the girl's father would do to him. But still he asked Sam, "Are you sure? Could it be a mistake? Did she smile like an innocent child?" "No, William, I'm sure. I'm already registered. You haven't told your parents yet." She looked him in the eye with a sneer, and he realized that this girl wasn't the shepherdess she'd been pretending to be all these months. "No, they don't know anything yet, but they can't drag it out, because soon everything will become apparent, and then your father will destroy me. If we get married, you'll be able to avoid reprisals, comrade generals." The cold turned to heat, and William was sweating and shivering. He couldn't get his thoughts together, but I kept waiting for an answer. "Sam, you realize I'm in a very difficult situation. Even if I filed for divorce right now, I'd still have to wait 3 months or more. You don't have to worry about that. My daddy will arrange it." He promised a young mistress immediately engaged in the divorce process, but the real steps did not make. The tangled story resolved itself thanks to an unexpected visit from Helen. After his wife gave him a blowout in a rented apartment and witnessed this humiliating scene was the future father-in-law. William filed for divorce. Helen also kept her promise, and on the same day the landlady showed up and demanded to vacate the apartment immediately. The old woman felt it her duty to speak out about the moral stability of some men. "William, I'm sorry I was wrong about you. I thought you were the paragon of the modern man. In fact, you're a common Alphonse." The woman almost snatched the keys out of his hand, leaving the tenants on the landing. I had to seek temporary shelter at Sam's when he told a friend in great detail about how his wife had uncovered his woof. Resolved laughed for about 5 minutes. "Hilarious. Your family history could be the basis for a romance series, Lieutenant William's Favorite Woman." "Really? That sounds great." William even took offense. "My life is falling apart, and all you have on your mind is baggies. By the way, you're the one who gave me Sam." "So some of the responsibility is on your shoulders," says the chief, getting serious. "William, don't confuse holy with righteous. No one forced you to take a girl into your bed. You have to take responsibility for your own actions." The marriage ceremony was held in a modest atmosphere because the bride was already in the last month of pregnancy. The final part of the celebration was a serious conversation with the father-in-law. The general took aside the newly minted son-in-law and hissed, "If I just notice, or someone tells me that you are a U.S. womanizer, you'll be in trouble." William mumbled, "I get it." Andrew laughed. "At least you didn't shit your pants." Don Juan. He patted his shoulder, and the young man felt the weight of the general's hand. "All right, don't worry. It's just a precaution. Treason is not allowed in my family." William realized that the last rule applied to him alone because the generals marched to the left. The academy was legendary, but Sam's family life didn't work out from day one. The young were taken in by Andrew's mother. In her 75, Sophia was characterized by inexhaustible energy. She got up at 6:00 a.m. and loudly turned on the radio. In the mandatory complex old lady included morning exercises, visiting swimming pools, walks in the park, and much more. Even the birth of a great-grandson did not change the usual schedule of the old lady. It was with her approval that the boy was named Russell. Sophia taught history for more than 40 years and believed that a person's name contains his future destiny. "Of course, my grandson is not destined to become a Grand Duke, but he will be able to repeat the fate of a great mathematician or musician." By efforts of great-grandmother, the boy already in 35 years read fluently and counted up to 100. When he was 5 years old, the elderly relative took him to audition for a music school. William had no time to raise his son because he was at work all day long. His father-in-law encouraged his son-in-law's zeal in every possible way, putting him on the most difficult parts of the job. But such a tense rhythm seemed beyond the strength of a provincial boy, and he quickly burned out. Family life also gave a crack because no one in the house did not consider his opinion. All led by the factory grandmother, Stay obediently fulfilled any whims of the old lady. Scandal broke out when little Russell asked his father, "Papa, what does it mean when they say, 'Do not sow the mare's tail'?" Someone said Grandma Sophia. She said, "You, Daddy, don't sew up the mare's tail." So I thought, why does a horse need a second tail? Isn't one tail enough? The man tried not to focus his son's attention on this common expression, and when his wife came home from work, he interrogated her. "Sam, tell me, what else have you and your grandmother established?" "I already know about the mare and the tail. Russell told me." "What other epithets did you stick on me?" Not a single muscle trembled on the face of my wife. She asked defiantly, "Is my grandmother wrong? You came here, living off everything. Your father gave you a good job. Where's the payoff? That's how you talk, isn't it? You want to kick back. You and your grandma use a calculator. Figure out your expenses by the day, and tell me, how much do I have to pay you?" The confrontation took place in the small kitchen. So Sophia immediately drew herself into the room and in a shrieking voice, she willed, "Young man, I will not allow myself to be insulted in my apartment." William had only 10 minutes to gather his things. When he appeared on the doorstep of Sam's apartment, the latter sighed understandingly. "Another crisis." "Yeah, I screwed up with my wife's grandmother. She turned my son against me, told him I was a no-no in their house. I wouldn't stand for that either. What can you do? Stay with us for a while. We'll figure something out later." William understood perfectly well that his act would incur the wrath of his father-in-law. And in that case, he might not even dream of working in the capital. But he didn't plan to go to the crazy old woman with a guilty head. After a sleepless night, he wrote a report for dismissal and was immediately summoned to the carpet. The general thundered and thundered. "What do you think you're doing, puppy dog? You can't outplay me. I'll sign your report, no problem. But remember, I'll write you such a character reference that a wolf ticket will seem like an angel's diploma in comparison. You won't be able to get a job anywhere. Captain." Andrew kept his word. William tried many times to get a job, but they wouldn't even take him to the district office from the countryside. He had to hire a businessman as a security guard when he met Nancy. She advised him to start his own detective agency. Nancy also ran a chain of stores. Their grown daughter. She was a little older than William, but she made him feel safe and secure. Their relationship developed smoothly and without unnecessary tension. A year later, their son Ethan was born. It was only then that they decided to get married. William looked around anxiously. He had forgotten the last time he had traveled by bus, so he felt understandably uncomfortable among the passengers waiting for their flight. His faithful iron horses broke down at the most inopportune moment, so he had to go to the workshop to some men he knew. They examined the cars for a long time, but their conclusion was disappointing. Today, it will not work. Only tomorrow and then closer to lunch. William had no other choice but to go to the dacha village by bus. The previous afternoon, he had gone to a familiar address, where he had lived with his family for more than 5 years. But the door was opened to him by an unfamiliar woman. She shook her head. "No, I have no idea where William Sam is. She may have lived in the apartment, but we had a triple exchange, so I can't tell you anything definitive." So the investigation had barely begun and was at a standstill. And then William remembered a friend and dialed his number. Sam surprised William. "We just broke up the day before yesterday. What's wrong with you again?" The man described his problem in a few words. The colonel stretched out contentedly. "You should have just said you wanted to find your ex-wife. Look, William, as a friend, tell me, are you not confusing yourself with them? I have one with my wives, and I'm going crazy. This is 3. All right, no offense. I'll text you the address in a couple hours, maybe sooner." William decided to grab a bite to eat. But just in the middle of his morning meal, he got a text message with the promised address. The private investigator decided to continue his search for Helen's daughter. But as luck would have it, the car broke down. There was a loud smack above his head. The man lifted his head up and realized it was the speaker turned on. The bus on the central bus station route leaves at 12:30 p.m. The small cluster of people near platform number 8 stirred. And very near and sounded a ringing girl's voice, at which William, all inside, turned cold. "Russell, I'll take the front seat, or we'll be standing all the way down again." He cautiously turned his head and faced the stare of homeless eyes like 2 lakes. The thought flashed through his mind that it was her, Lisa. And that guy, could it really be Russell? Someone behind him slapped him sensitively on the shoulder. "Man, why are you standing there like a stone statue? If you aren't in no hurry, it's an idea to step aside." The old man with the pointy beard swung his cane once more. But William dodged the blow and leaped into the saloon with the stream. Two completely opposite feelings were struggling inside him. On the one hand, the excitement of a detective, and on the other hand, he remembered that he was a father and had a grown-up son. Which of these two feelings was more important? He had to decide during the journey. The couple sat down at the very back of the cabin, and William watched them near the driver's cab. He must have been looking at the girl too intently, because she suddenly showed him her tongue. Her companion laughed loudly and whispered something in her ear. Elissa was angry too, with a ringing laugh. The man thought how similar they are to Helen and me. Back then at camp, we used to walk around like two idiots and make everyone laugh. He turned away and did not look in the direction where the fugitives had settled. Finally, the bus reached its destination. William decided to take his time and left the bus last. Cautiously remembering everything he had been taught, he followed the couple as they disappeared into the house. William was surprised to realize that the address where he was standing now and the address on the piece of paper were exactly the same. So it appeared that Lisa, the first wife's daughter, was now with his son at the second wife's house. In some ways, of course, his friend. Here, if you don't know everyone pretty intimately, you can really get confused. He wondered. Apparently, his son didn't recognize him. So Sam was adamant that she didn't want to remember him. It was strange why she had moved from a well-appointed nice apartment to here. And how did her daddy let all this happen? Maybe they had a fight. There was no end to the speculation. But there was no time for that now. One had to decide what to do next, whether to go in or whether it would be better to call Helen again. Far from the first time, William made the more favorable decision for himself. He pulled out his cell phone. "Hello, Helen. I found them. Helen asked me to wait for her. You see, Mark's out of town right now, and I need some support. Lissa's a very smart girl, and sometimes I just can't get enough arguments. Our arguments just end up in a stalemate. How often do you argue?" "A lot. If you're interested, I'll be sure to tell you." "Okay, Helen, I'll be waiting." He sat down on a bench near the cabin and thought. And that's what's wrong with him. Helen was a mess. And it did. Now with Nancy. He's earning at his wife's level now, but he feels inadequate. And he's not used to that. He's used to it, so he can't get his head around it. "Why are you here?" William flinched, turned around. His son was looking at him. Now he was certain there was no mistake. Russell's eyes were unrecognizable because they were his eyes. "Hello, Russell." He spoke slowly, calmly, trying to buy a few minutes to figure out what to do next. "Hello, but that doesn't negate the question. If you came to us, why didn't you come in? And how did you find us in the last 10 or 12 years we haven't heard from you?" William suddenly felt terribly tired of doing and saying things in a comfortable way. "I came to see you, but not in a capacity." "In what capacity do you think?" "I came on business, on business." "Has someone committed a crime?" "No, Russell. Sit down, please." The guy hesitated for a minute, but then he sat down. "Somehow, he recognized me, and I didn't. There's not even a picture of you in our house." "Did your mom recognize you?" "She got nervous. So I came out to see what you wanted. Of course, no one committed any crime. And I haven't worked for the police for a long time." "Where do you work?" "I'm a private investigator." Russell's eyes flashed with admiration for a second, but he immediately averted them as if to put them out. "Lissa's parents hired you." "Yes, they did." Russell jumped up. "Why are they giving her a hard time?" William looked at the boy and firmly said, "Sit down." The boy obeyed. William chose his words. Now the main thing is not to make a mistake, so he needs to forget that he is a private detective, and remember that he was a father twice already. "Russell, listen to me. Running away from home and making your family worry, that's not exactly mature. It's an adult thing to stand up for yourself, to stand up for what you believe in, to not get bent out of shape. Just because you hit her doesn't make you an adult. You know you're doing her a disservice. If her dad wants her, I'm guessing he'll be all over you in a heartbeat. So you chose the wrong path instead of pursuing the right to be with the girl. You hid with her. Now tell me, how long are you going to hide? A month, a year, 10 years. And what's next? Russell bowed his head and didn't think. On this side of things, by taking Lisa, you automatically assumed responsibility for her. You see, if she doesn't learn, you have only yourself to blame. If she gets sick, same thing. What am I supposed to do? They won't let us see each other. You do anything for her. Anything. So you have to prove that you can do something, that you're exactly what Lisa needs. I'm not just saying that. And I've done things wrong in my time. I've done things the wrong way, and I've done things that hurt people around me. I'd hate for you to make my mistakes. Russell did. Thanks, I'll think about it. Son, maybe we could get together sometime, sit down and talk. Maybe now I need to talk to Lisa. Russell had just entered the house when a beautiful car appeared in the driveway. From the looks of it, it was Helen's. William sighed and stood up. He was about to have a very serious and very difficult conversation. They were sitting in a small cafe they could barely find. Helen looked at him with huge eyes. I don't understand what you are suggesting. Leave her here and drive home. If Russell really loves her, then Lisa will go home tonight. Helen looked at him carefully. It's like you've changed. He hummed sadly. No, you see, when I saw Russell, I realized that life doesn't stand still. I thought I was just like him a short time ago, but it turns out it wasn't me. He was the grown-up me. I watched them as they rode the bus. They look a lot like you and me, the way we were when we first met. Helen smiled back. Remember when you punched that one? I do. I remember everything. I even had a thought. It's important. Anyway, I realized another one. You can't go back to the past. You can't change it, but you can make it worse. That's easy. While we're chasing, there's no time to do anything at all. Helen, I really hope you'll listen to me and let your daughter make her own choices. Well, you have to make adjustments, of course, but without fanaticism. I got to go. Excuse me, she's waiting. William jumped out of the cafeteria and almost immediately caught a car. Things with Nancy have been really bad lately, and he and only he is to blame. It's happening all over again. Something's wrong with him, and the relationship is falling apart. He's not interested in his family, his son. He's already lost one son. Even if they communicate, there won't be any warmth in the relationship. But Ethan, he seems to have some important competitions coming up. Maybe they've already passed. William was ready to tear his hair out and said one thing to himself like an incantation, just so long as it wasn't too late. He stopped at the florist, then the candy store. He flew up to the right floor in one fell swoop and stopped in front of his door. Whether to catch his breath or to gather courage, he finally opened the door to the hallway. Out came Nancy, raised an eyebrow in surprise when she saw the flowers in his hands. You're going somewhere. No, Nancy, these are for you. My wife even dropped the towel in surprise. Yes, for you, I'm sorry. I've completely stopped paying attention to you. It's my fault and mine alone. Let's try again. She looked at him for a long time. William felt as if Nancy's eyes could see right through him. Then she smiled a little visibly. Well, go wash your hands and I'll go put the kettle on. Or maybe some wine. William exhaled. Neither. Where's our son? At training, in case you've forgotten. He's got a competition coming up. The man wanted to lie habitually, but at the last moment he restrained himself. I forgot. I honestly forgot. I remembered only in front of the house, and I was very afraid that I missed them. And Ethan won't forgive me for that. Nancy walked over to him, put her hand on his shoulder, and reminded him, why, Ethan? I want us as a family to go to a coffee shop or a restaurant. They didn't hear Ethan already in the hallway, and I'm all for it. Because if I don't eat something right now, I'm going to starve to death. The evening went really well. They talked a lot, as if they hadn't seen each other in years, even though they hadn't. William had forgotten how clever his wife was and how funny his son was. After dinner, they went for a walk in the park, ate ice cream, and talked again. The man watched with a smile as his son picked himself up, stretching out as girls his age walked by. William realized now that the time had come when things had to change, or they might not make it. Russell called a week later. I'm ready to meet you. I need to tell you. Yeah, sure, we'll meet and you can tell me everything. Tell me where and when. Russell called the cafe. And the man quickly said, can I come with someone else? I want you to meet my brother. I have a brother. It's strange that Mom showed you me but didn't tell you anything. Dad, Mom, how can I tell you? Well, she's been drinking a little bit since Grandpa died. That's why we moved here, because I don't feel any better here. So that cleared that up. But my father's character, which is what it was all about, didn't. But she didn't even call him. He told his family tonight. Nancy listened attentively with her head bowed. Igor's eyes were wide open. He had no idea he had a brother either. Nancy decisively put the cup on the table. William, you have to help her, not so much her as her son. You realize she must be treated. But how? She'll never agree to it. And I think you should talk to her and convince her. He wanted to move out because he didn't want to get himself in trouble, but he didn't. No, absolutely everything. He has to clean up his own mess. Dad, you're not going to believe this. It turned out exactly the way you said it would. Lisa came home, and her mother didn't even scold her. They talked. Lisa says that Mom had never had such a serious adult conversation with her. And Mom said we both have to finish school. And if our feelings don't cool down in the meantime, we'll get married. Well, you see, you don't want to tie the knot. It'll be hard to untie it later. The conversation came and went. It was a difficult one. The woman was hysterical and kept saying it was all his fault. Then she calmed down a bit and was able to listen to him. It's been 3 years. William, how do I look? Nancy was spinning around in front of the mirror, and he was enjoying looking at her. Nancy had changed a lot lately. It was as if she were younger, glowing from the inside out. He sometimes caught himself thinking that his wife was much prettier than many famous models. Charmingly stunning. Nancy sighed. Are you deceiving me again? How can a woman that age looks charming? The man pleaded with Nancy. Don't torture me. You're really the most beautiful. Come on, I'm the groom's father after all. Nancy splashed her hands. Oh, and our son is a witness for the first time in his life. Let's go quickly. She jumped out of the apartment and ran down the stairs with high heels. William only shook his head. Understand, these women 5 minutes ago have nothing to wear. And here she was already shuffling impatiently by the car. As if he'd made himself wait an extra half hour. Russell stood like a stone statue next to him, his brother Ethan standing just as still. At first, Sam, when she learned that Lisa, the daughter of his first wife, was the daughter of his first wife, stood up, but then she said, Mary, it's not fair for everyone to suffer for one man. The ceremony was in full swing. Everyone was listening intently. Lisa was so beautiful that she seemed like some crystal vase. William looked around the hall. Helen with her husband and children smiling, wiping away tears. Her husband gently supports her and strokes her shoulder with his hand a little further away. Sam, she is not alone today. There is a tall man next to her. It seems to be a doctor. They have a very warm relationship. And it looks like things are looking up for another wedding. Then he looked at Ethan. In a little while, and Ethan would be standing in the groom's place. And William might well have missed such a moment. He shifted his gaze to his present wife, smiled. Good for him after all. If it hadn't been for him, these people wouldn't be here. Lisa and Russell wouldn't be so happy. He'll explain to his son that you can never put your own desires first. But one thing he realized now was that his life was what it had turned out to be. And now he clearly realized that he didn't want to change anything in it. The time had come, and life itself will put everything in its place.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Evelyn was furious. She wanted to tear, throw, and smash the dishes, especially the one his parents had given her and John for their wedding. The exquisite set produced by the famous porcelain factory was not a pity, and it is desirable to break saucers and cups with recognizable cobalt mesh and heads, unfaithful quite the opposite, the husband and his mistress. Well, and let the beautiful porcelain perish, let the cheaters and vile duplicitous person suffer. That's what they should do. Let even I and Evelyn have to answer for this deed, even towards myself, betrayed by the man I loved. There was no pity. The soul was filled with resentment, anger, and a desire to get even with John, who, as it turned out, had not only cheated her, but also wanted to eliminate her. For him, his loving wife was just an unfortunate obstacle on the way to wealth. This Miranda is good too. Ready to be an accomplice to crime to help her lover achieve a dishonest goal. A burning mixture of emotions was pushing Evelyn to reckless action, but the woman with the remnants of prudence realized she couldn't afford to give in to her emotions. Her tantrum would mean victory for that nasty traitor John and his filthy bedfellow Miranda. To allow her own defeat, Evelyn could not allow herself to be defeated. Wow! Just 15 minutes ago, I was perfectly happy. And now everything in my life has changed so drastically that I'm dizzy. My husband has a mistress, and this is his Miranda. She personally hired, was always satisfied with the employee, and even provided her career growth. When Miranda complained about the deterioration of her health due to work in the kitchen, and said that she would look for a job in the office, she offered her a place as an accountant. Yes, Evelyn, you're a terrible judge of character. The woman scolded herself mentally. Out of all the options, she chose John, the one who had recently heard with his own ears, so cunningly and cold-bloodedly discussing with his mistress a plan to eliminate his wife. I want him to be so cunning and judicious that the law enforcement agencies have no questions for him because of his wife's premature death. Miranda, yuck, she's giving advice too. Interested in ridding her lover of his legitimate wife? Well, he's good. He wants to arrange the case in such a way as to stay in the maximum benefit, almost no effort. That's where his law degree comes in handy. Although, as far as I know, John wasn't involved in criminal cases. But I can't say that I know him at all. How could I have ever imagined that in the company of his mistress, my husband would dare to eliminate me? Besides, who knows what kind of connections he has? It's quite possible that this nasty couple will manage to arrange the whole thing so that she, Evelyn, will go to the grave, and they will live happily ever after. Yeah, they're dangerous enemies. That's why we can't let these vile creatures know what they're up to. Otherwise, they will act even more secretly or accelerate the realization of a despicable plan in life. It is necessary to keep a cool head in order to expose the traitors without the possibility of getting away with it. Both John and Miranda must suffer the punishment they deserve for the dastardly deed they have so carefully planned, especially since the price of their success will be her life. An apartment and a little but still already profitable business. And after all, how wonderful and romantic everything began. The upset woman felt that tears were about to flow from her eyes and hastily parked the car in the parking lot in front of the nearest grocery store. Leaning back in her seat, Evelyn sank into her memories. During the period when she had met John, Evelyn's mood had been far from romantic. She was surrounded by the whirlwind of business associated with opening her own cooking shop, which planned to prepare baked goods from homemade recipes. Of course, it was much more complicated than using some already promoted franchise, but it was just such an original bakery she planned to organize together with her childhood friend Molly. Their kind and trusting relationship had developed in high school, and then, although they had scattered to different colleges, they had kept their friendship almost unchanged. It was surprising, but romantic. And often flying in the clouds, Evelyn did not irritate straightforward and pragmatic Molly, and her serious advice often helped to avoid trouble. The tandem of such dissimilar girls was perfect, and in the cafe their roles were distributed long before the opening. Molly, who had a profession of accountant, was ready to take on all money matters because she knew them, and even, surprising her friend with love and attention, shared the delight of a successful debit and credit. Evelyn, who had been trained as a pastry chef just on the profile of the conceived enterprise, by that time had already worked for several years in a quite decent institution and learned many valuable nuances, about which nothing said teachers in college. With the registration of the company and the initial capital, the girls were greatly helped by their parents. But both Evelyn and Molly put out to the maximum, but it was still difficult. Far not stupid Evelyn very quickly realized that the experience was clearly not enough. Being an employee is much easier than managing everything yourself, but there was nowhere to retreat to, and the girls strived for their goal. On that momentous day, which turned absolutely everything upside down, Molly got sick, and Evelyn had to do the most unproductive thing in the world alone. Waiting, of course, the two of them would have been much more fun, but as it was solo, she tried to fill the time with something useful, cleaning, thinking about the menu again, as if she hadn't devoted nearly a few years to it. However, excitement kept her from concentrating, and the variety of sites on the World Wide Web helped not to agonize over the wait at all. The supplier promised to deliver the ordered furniture in the morning, literally from the moment she got up, but it turned out to be empty words. Evelyn during the day several times called, asked to wait for the car just a little bit. So Evelyn did not go far from the future establishment. She believed that in 15 minutes and then in half an hour, the furniture should finally be brought, but after another reminder, she was informed about the suddenly appeared problem. And as a result, even by lunchtime, nothing had been delivered yet. We managed to wait for the furniture only closer to the evening. The assemblers, however, were clearly skillful and soon departed, leaving behind a nice-looking version of the room. Evelyn was incredibly happy that her long-held idea was about to become a reality. But as soon as she closed the door behind the assemblers, she realized how tired she was. She knew from experience that there were two very opposite ways to regain strength. The easiest, of course, was to eat sweets. However, this option threatened her already not ideal figure, constantly fighting with the extra pounds on her body. Evelyn tried as little as possible to give in to the desire to eat, too disposed to fullness and favorite profession and heredity. So the girl chose an alternative and even healthy way, a walk in the city park, which from time immemorial was called the country park. Although in modern historical reality, it was practically in the center of the regional capital. It was quite close to it from the future cafe. Accordingly, Evelyn, on the advice of her parents, chose this place. The location is good, and the park reminds of carefree childhood, in which visiting the park was a real holiday, even if you went there almost every week during the summer season. Evelyn always looked forward to it with joyful anticipation. On the evening of meeting John, however, the walk seemed to come with a catch. Evelyn had too lightly ignored the clouds in the sky, hoping to complete her promenade before the rain began to fall. The downpour came suddenly, and the trusty umbrella let down, took and broke, refusing to manage its life-saving dome. Evelyn tried to hide under a tree, stretching its crown over the paved path to call a cab, and almost howled in frustration. While the furniture was being assembled, the girl was so worried about the process that she forgot to put her smartphone on the charger. And here is the sad result. Such a necessary gadget now nasty beeped and turned off, discharged to 0. Of course, exactly by the law of meanness, at the most inopportune moment, Evelyn had to hurry to the stop, feeling how not at all in spring cold threads of rain, causing shivering. And then the water stopped raining down on her from above. It turned out that some stranger had sheltered her under his umbrella, nestled next to her and pacing to the girl's rhythm, the man offered, "Girl, you're probably already soaked, of course, but let me protect you nonetheless." Evelyn was a little confused, but did not reject the help. After all, there were other hurrying park visitors around, and it was not scary at all. Besides, the stranger behaved quite adequately and did not offer anything reprehensible or indecent. Together they reached the public transportation stop. A lot of potential competitors crowded under the awning. Shuttles were passing by, and the streetcar that came by was so packed with passengers that only a few of the most active lucky ones managed to squeeze into the carriages. The stranger introduced himself and explained, "My name is John. You know, I was taught that once you help, you should never give up." Evelyn didn't want to go to her parents' house for the night, so they gave her daughter a ride to the driveway. There, to the girl's surprise, John was waiting for her. He had flowers in his hands, and it so happened that he as if immediately met potential relatives. The man held himself without embarrassment, but apologized to Evelyn's mom and dad. "Jenna and James, I apologize. I didn't think that today I was going to meet you, and I didn't prepare you and your husband appropriate presents. I promise to correct the mistake at our next meetings." Her parents were rather wary of the active, though very courteous John, but they could not influence Evelyn. She was completely enchanted by the man. He quickly became the most necessary person to her. The girl was a little disturbed that the relationship between her lover and Molly was turning out abominably. The girlfriend contemptuously wrinkled her nose when John gave her some compliments and did not hesitate to snap if he dared to make critical remarks. "Look, Evelyn, I understand the lovey-dovey, head-over-heels thing, but don't you notice how strange John's eyes are? It's like he's scanning the person he's talking to for easy and vulnerable weaknesses so that he can strike a devastating blow if he has to. His pupils dilate and constrict to the size of pinheads. Look, I wish you'd be more careful with him. Don't be in such a hurry to let him into your life." Evelyn tried her best to protect her lover. "Molly, you're not quite right. I mean, John does have a special, scrutinizing look, but that's just the cost of his former profession. He used to be a police officer, and then he decided to become a lawyer. Don't take offense that he criticizes you. He's just used to telling the truth. That red polka dot dress really turned you into some kind of villager. Remember what we used to say when we were kids? You look like an auntie mother in that dress." Evelyn did not even notice that John really often hurts and pokes, mocks her friend without any good reason. The walks together had stopped almost immediately. The man seemed to be polite, but managed to irritate Evelyn, causing an unpleasant feeling of jealousy because of the numerous and intrusive questions he asked her friend. He was interested in absolutely everything: where she studied, where and with whom she lives, what kind of accounting experience she has, and even in what store she prefers to buy clothes. In the end, he was tired of answering. Molly, who was not known for her humility and patience, burst out, "John, why on earth would you think I'm in your office being interrogated? Look around. We're in the lobby of a movie theater with Evelyn. You give her your attention and leave me alone. I'm sick and tired of your questions. I'm tired of making excuses for something I didn't do." After that, the girl hastily said goodbye to her friend and went home, not listening to the entreaties to stay. Since then, Molly generally tried to avoid communicating with her unpleasant person. Of course, it was impossible to completely exclude meetings, but she tried not to talk to John and even sometimes frankly ignored the questions he asked her. By the fall, the cafe had become a success. There were regular customers, including not too wealthy, but many students from the nearby university. Evelyn was overjoyed. Judging by the figures Molly had shown her, there was already a net profit. It wasn't much, but it was good. We haven't recouped our investment yet. The accountant reported. But if things continue at the same pace, then, according to my forecasts, by the beginning of February, we'll recoup everything and work in the plus. I'll have to think about it. Maybe we could do something special for Christmas. Evelyn understood that she had to work even harder so that the stable high income would allow her small team to be proudly recognized as a winner. Therefore, the quality must not be reduced and the assortment must be renewed. Her friend's idea turned out to be successful, and soon technological maps for painted holiday gingerbread were already being developed. Simultaneously with the growth of profits, another joyful event took place. John made Evelyn a proposal to marry him, and she, without playing the popular girlish coquetry, "Olga, I need to think," immediately responded with consent. Molly, on hearing the news, wrinkled her pretty face and gave her friend a shocked expression of her feelings on the subject. "I feel for you, Evelyn. That slippery John is clearly not out of love for you, insisting on getting married." Evelyn was incredibly offended at the time. "So you think I'm impossible to love? Is it because I'm fat? Well, you should know that John is perfectly happy with my figure." Molly tried to justify herself. "I'm not talking about your looks. You're fine with them. Although I noticed that in the morning, instead of a croissant, you chew oatmeal cookies with coffee without adding sugar and cream. I just suggest you take a closer look at how John behaves when he thinks no one can see him. It's like he's doing calculations in his head all the time." Evelyn got defensive about her lover, and finally that conversation ended in an ugly spat between the friends. They almost stopped communicating, except for work matters. However, neither the quarrels with her best friend nor her mother's requests to take a break and think did not affect Evelyn's decision. She perceived doubts in the groom as an insult to her personally. The girl was infatuated with John and married him. The only thing she went against her fiancé in was his desire for a prenuptial agreement. Wide a romantic Evelyn seemed that it lowers the bright feeling of love to a pragmatic deal. John did not insist, but at his gentle request, the gift money was used to buy the family car. Evelyn was not at all embarrassed by the fact that she did not have a driver's license at that time, and in fact, the car became the sole property of her husband. He sometimes drove her to work, but often their schedules didn't coincide. To get to work and back to her apartment, where she now lived with John, she had long been accustomed to public transportation, and her driving school tuition was constantly postponed because she was so busy. Business required constant attention. Competitors were not slumbering, opening nearby establishments of similar orientation. Had to constantly go half a step ahead, not only responding to demand. Gradually, after careful thought and calculation, we came up with new products. Some ideas turned out to be unsuccessful, but in general, the development of the business pleased both the owners and those who received jobs and decent wages. In the process, there were several not too pleasant cases when visitors tried to seek compensation for allegedly substandard products. But John intervened in the proceedings, and everything was settled in a pre-trial manner. For this intercession, Evelyn fell even more in love with the man. He seemed to her a real ideal. However, dissatisfied customers were the exception. Mostly visitors liked the institution, but business partners not satisfied with the results achieved. In the assortment appeared sweets made for people who adhered to good nutrition. Evelyn, though she was not immediately aware of it, was embarrassed by her sweet, vanilla raisin bun-like figure. She was annoyed by her own rounded knees, her chubby arms, the fat accumulations hiding her waist. Disregarding the advice of her mother, the young woman began to adhere to a strict diet. The regime of calorie deficit not immediately, but still went in favor of the figure, but from the former cheerful character is almost nothing left. Only trust in her husband was unchanged. Over time, Evelyn and Molly decided to expand their own network and open another cafe. Let it again lead to anxiety and turmoil, but there should be development. That's what the friends thought. Of course, Evelyn informed John about the idea, with whom she always shared all the news. "Honey, we have the money to invest in the expansion, although we will probably have to take out a loan to speed up the process." But Molly is optimistic. John, in response, has given his wife the benefit of the doubt. "You know, it seems to me that the cafe should have shown much better results. I don't want to upset you, but if you want my opinion, I'll give it to you." "Of course, John, I'm listening attentively." Evelyn encouraged her lover and heard something she didn't expect. In general, to be honest, without any offense, it is necessary to double-check how it is your kind, Molly keeps accounting. "I think she's taking some of the money out from under your nose, taking advantage of your boundless trust. Opening a new outlet, that's a lot of money to sneak around. She'll collude with the decorating crew. She'll make even more money off your naivete." Evelyn was outraged. "Oh, come on, John. Molly's like a sister to me. We've been friends since high school, and I have confidence in her." The man continued to insist. "I'm telling you, she's stealing profits, happy that you're naive and gullible. She's jealous of you, that's why she's doing it. And I'm afraid that's just the flowers, and she's saving the berries. Well, if Molly decides to punish you financially for your happiness, she once tried to charm me despite you. I regret that I didn't immediately turn on my tape recorder and record her calling you fat and suggesting that I start an affair with her." Evelyn didn't immediately believe her husband. After all, it's not easy to undo a friendship that has lasted more than 17 years. However, John, with the persistence of a man absolutely sure of his own rightness, continued to convince his wife that in the form of Molly, she had a snake in her heart. The second cafe was open, but the renovation of the premises was completely under John's control. Molly often complained to Evelyn that the estimate seemed excessive, but her friend reassured her. "John knows what he's doing." Stubborn Molly pointed both her friend and her husband to the lines in the printed table, openly said that some positions are not very real at all, but earned only a contemptuous statement. "John, well, of course, you only see the numbers. You probably compared the cost of services of some gastarbeiters and the prices of goods taken from old ads. You think you are someone else. What an expert in heels." Molly wanted to get into a verbal fight with her friend's husband, but Evelyn, trying to smooth the conflict, got into the argument. "You know, remember Pushkin's fairy tale. You can't just chase after cheapness. You yourself realize how important for the perfect result are quality materials and a reliable team. These figures also include the conviction that everything will be done quickly, professionally, without unnecessary nervousness for us." John and Molly exchanged hateful glances. The girl called Evelyn her husband a night cuckoo, but did not stop criticizing his actions, causing her friends displeasure. The man also did not lag behind and regularly told his wife that she trusted her smarmy accountant in vain. Everything was complicated by the fact that Evelyn, although she admitted it to herself, hardly envied the slender and incredibly graceful, which without consequences for the figure, dainty buns, and in general had a very attractive appearance. The boat of friendship, rocking more and more strongly, which quite predictably led to disaster. About a year ago, a terribly unpleasant conversation had taken place between the friends. They then sat up in a closed cafe, from which Even left, who had already done her jaw-cleaning lady, and discussed the details of opening a already the third branch. John found a place for the establishment and even made a deposit from the family stash. After Molly said that the man offered a knowingly failed option, located in an unsuccessful neighborhood and obviously not for the simplicity of heart, overpaid, Evelyn took offense for her beloved and told her friend everything that accumulated on her soul. She even mentioned Molly's signs of attention to her husband. For a few seconds after the verbal outpourings of her friend, Molly was silent and then grinned. "Evelyn, I'm sorry, but everything you just said is complete nonsense. I swear I have no interest whatsoever in your precious John. More to the point, I despise him, and even kind of hate him for the way he's managed to shake our friendship to the state it's in now. Your John, pardon my bluntness, he's an opportunist as cunning and thoughtful as a nesting cuckoo. He systematically destroys all competitors for resources, remaining the only and favorite. You yourself think with your head. He lives on your territory, drives a car which is registered to him, but bought with your money. You almost completely updated his closet. Remember at your leisure and count how much he contributes to the budget of your family. In fact, it's time you opened your eyes. Can't you see that this John of yours is just pitting us against each other? How can you be so naive? If we're having this conversation, John was trying to flirt with me, not me with him. But it didn't work out, so I told him to fuck off. When that stunt didn't work, he decided to eliminate me from the people you trust. Well, I'll tell you what. I vouch for my work. Everything in our business is good with accounting. Even an additional independent audit you can order. But I'm warning you, it's a waste of money. If all you care about is John's peace of mind, then we're not going anywhere. I'm sick and tired of him meddling in everything, even in matters he has no idea about, and turning you against me. So along with the accounting firm, get an accountant. After this total distrust, it's unlikely we'll be able to continue working as before. How then Evelyn was angry, indignant, and a little frightened. After all, John had warned her that this was exactly how Molly would respond. So her husband was right about everything else. The audit was conducted. No irregularities were found. And no matter how hard Evelyn tried to talk her friend out of quitting, Molly was adamant. The question of her share in the business was also solved when Evelyn, with the help of John of course, stammered that she was ready to pay a certain amount. In addition to the share of authorized capital, the girl agreed, although in her eyes was clearly visible contempt. "I hope you realize what you're doing." Coldly, Molly said, "I refuse my participation in the business and leave the founders only because I do not want to have anything to do with the family, which is ruled by a despicable man. I just want to give you one last warning. Don't dissolve into him. He's not the kind of man you can trust unconditionally." As it seemed so convenient at the time, Miranda, the pastry chef, told the owner of the cafe that her health was making it difficult for her to work in the kitchen. She took Molly's place, and Evelyn simple-mindedly all this year did not even think about the fact that everything was somehow successful and well put together. She just had no time to think again, and she couldn't suspect her husband. She still loved him blindly. John had become everything she could be: lover, friend. There was no one in the spacious hall, and the woman was ready to shout a greeting, but suddenly she heard her husband's voice in the hall, potentially suitable for the kitchen. Not understanding what had come over her, Evelyn tiptoed closer and realized that John was speaking not to the builders, but to his mistress, and it seemed to be her, his lawful wife. Most of all now I regret that in due time I did not persuade this cow in love to sign the contract. I would have laid it out so well that it would have been hard for her to figure it out, and after the divorce she would have been left with nothing. Then you and I would be on fire, but for now, it's just the way it is. The familiar female voice, which Evelyn easily recognized as her accountant Miranda's, rebuked her crankily. "Let's at least go out tonight. Go for a walk or rent an apartment, shall we?" "It's a bit extreme." John sighed expressively. "Oh, Miranda, I'd invite you over. But my wife's mother might show up at the apartment at the worst possible moment. Her lovely daughter will be here tomorrow, and she'll think of all sorts of fatty goodies. She herself is fat, and she has raised her daughter the same way." Miranda's voice spoke again. "Well, John, you're not quite fair. Yours has lost a lot of weight lately." Unaware that Evelyn was standing a few meters away from him. John laughed. "Well, scrawny cow, not yet a quivering doe. Sagging skin, though she's trying to do some exercises, but she's got a nasty temper. That's like you, not a woman, but a feast of the soul. And body." Miranda said flirtatiously. "Yes, Miranda and body. I myself would like to enjoy your company in a comfortable environment, but for now I have to hide. But that's okay, we'll bury this fatty and take every penny." Evelyn held on only on moral willpower. There was a great desire to appear in front of her lovers and express their indignation, not shy in expressions. However, the next phrase Miranda literally made stick to the floor. "No, John, it is desirable to cremate Evelyn. Then we can live without fear. After all, in that case, no one will be able to find out the real reason for your widowhood." There was both admiration and something like fear in John's voice as he answered his mistress. "You're a dangerous little thing, Miranda. Do you watch too many detectives? You're right. Cremation is the perfect way to hide the ends, but not in water, but in fire. I'll probably have to talk to her parents about burial arrangements, but I think I can convince them that the option I'm proposing makes sense. It is unpleasant that they too will be heirs of the first turn, but it is also solvable. Again, from the loss of my beloved only daughter, there's not much that can happen. I believe you will think of everything in the best way." Miranda squealed enthusiastically. There was the sound of kissing, and instinctively recoiling from the revulsion that seized her, Evelyn caught a water bottle lying on the floor, which must have been left by the builders. "Oh, John," Miranda exclaimed, "I think I heard some noise in the next room." "Oh, come on, it's nothing. The builders are long gone. Maybe a mouse from the slackness of unscrupulous exterminators survived." John began to calm his mistress. "I think you just imagined it, but don't be nervous and don't get distracted. We'd have more pleasant things to do than chase mice, my kitty." Evelyn even covered her mouth with her hand to keep from screaming with resentment and disgust at the luscious tone of John's voice. Miranda continued to insist. "John, please go and see what's out there. I can't relax thinking that someone is around or even peeking at us." Not waiting for Miranda to persuade John to check the room, Evelyn hurried away quietly, so as not to let on that she was here and had overheard such an unpleasant conversation. Wiping away her tears, Evelyn picked up her phone and looked online to verify her husband's words. It was just as he had said. Since they hadn't decided to have a child yet, if something happened, her parents and the cunning, sneaky John would be the first-line heirs. The woman was horrified. So her mom and dad are also at risk. There was no doubt left. One must strike a preemptive strike against the traitors. Can't risk her parents, can't worry them either. Going home and pretending to John that she missed him, that she was happy to see him, and that everything between them was still the same, Evelyn was in no condition. Ironically, the only person to whom the woman treacherously betrayed by her supposedly loving husband and seemingly reliable employee could turn for help was Molly. Except, as a once resentful friend, would treat the request to at least listen and offer sound advice. Almost without breathing, Evelyn listened to the long beeps and then finally, a vigorous greeting came from the speakers. "Hello, Molly, please forgive me for everything. You were completely right. I'm in such a situation that I'm scared, terribly scared. Please meet me. I can't tell you everything over the phone." Molly had forgiven her friend, or she was gloating. Evelyn didn't care. What mattered was that she heard the words that were so important to her. "All right, come on over. You probably haven't forgotten the address. My parents are on vacation, by the way, or they probably wouldn't let you in." Unlike her friend, Molly did not want to live separately from her mom and dad. She thought with her rational mind that there was no point in getting involved in mortgage bondage, and it is better to save the necessary amount, little by little, so as not to overpay. Soon Evelyn was already sitting in the cozy kitchen and under the ticking of the antique clock, which since the childhood of her girlfriends were already in this very place, and having told about her problem, summed up. That's the story. You can rightfully say that you warned me about not trusting John completely. I was wrong, and now I'm surprised I didn't notice what kind of person he really is. I guess the whole staff knows about his affair with Miranda, except for me. Molly shook her head as she listened to her friend without interrupting. "Even I didn't expect this from your husband, even though I've seen that he's a real scoundrel without principles or morals. I didn't think he'd be willing to do such a thing for profit. But I can't imagine how you're going to do it. Most likely the time is very little, because they have already decided everything, judging by what you say. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna say the nicest things. But since they're agreeing on cremation, it's likely that poisoning will be the method of your elimination. Probably the best solution would be to move out of your own apartment for a while and strictly forbid any food or drink from John and Miranda's hands. But there's a catch. Your enemies may not slip the poison directly, but simply place it within reach. Going to the police is probably useless and maybe even more dangerous than dealing with John on your own. I understand you didn't make a tape of the conversation between your husband and his mistress. And on top of all that, he may still have friends among the police. It's your word against his word, so it's a pretty good bet. John is a lawyer, and things may not work out in your favor. I'm also concerned that your parents are at risk. Even if you leave, as if on a long business trip or on vacation, they can override their plan and take care of Jenna's uncle and aunt, who, if it happened to you, would be hares of the first turn. Feel sorry for them, and frankly for you too. You got yourself into this John of yours. Now you're gonna have to work hard to get out of it without getting hurt. So you can't run away, and it's dangerous to make a scandal right now. I don't know how the sweet couple of lovers will act then. We will have to win by cunning, but we must think it over very well. The friends began to think over the options, but the conversation was interrupted by Evelyn's call. It was John. Answer it, but don't talk to him for long, or he'll be able to sense something wrong from your voice. Tell him you're tired and you're going to bed. Molly whispered her advice for some reason. John spoke to Evelyn sweetly and sympathetically. She almost began to doubt that she had recently heard with her own ears how her husband dreamed of the happy life of a rich widower, just as her friend had advised. The woman was more silent than speaking, and seeing the eloquent glance to wrap up, quickly ended the conversation by imitating a yawn. "John, I am terribly tired today. See you tomorrow." Making sure the call ended, Evelyn put the smartphone down on the table and grimaced, trying to hold back the tears that were bursting out. How could anyone lie so perfectly? If I didn't know he was dreaming of getting rid of me, I'd actually believe what he said about the separation being unbearable for him. Lies, so cynical, deceives, so unprincipled, speaks tender words, even with the slightest intonation, without revealing his true feelings and desire to destroy me. What kind of man is he? Molly consoled a friend who had almost become an ex for good. Unfortunately, it was obvious to everyone but you that your chosen one was a fruit. You didn't listen to anyone's advice, but there's no time to regret the past. You have to do something in the present, so as not to get into an even more difficult situation. Evelyn was horrified at how Molly was calmly studying the situation and only managed to ask something. What am I supposed to do? Molly continued to reason, saying everything with a stride so as not to unnerve her friend. First of all, you should not panic. It won't help and may even harm you. I'm afraid that with the active assistance of Miranda, John has insured himself and withdrawn to secret accounts, probably opened on someone else's data, an impressive amount of money. Of course, if they expect to eliminate you completely, maybe they didn't make unnecessary movements. What's the use of making a fuss, and in case of unfavorable circumstances, risk being caught? If after a short wait, you can get a much bigger payoff. Anyway, the first point of our plan is to find out the details of their conspiracy. We need information like air, but only time, as I understand it, is short, catastrophic. I cannot even think of the right thing to do. Probably, it will be better to be reinsured, and your parents should be sent somewhere on vacation until everything is resolved. It will be necessary to lie low, to catch all the oddities, to reliably denounce the traitors. It would be nice to be able to listen in on John's conversations. But unfortunately, I don't know anyone who can get such equipment quickly. Do you? Evelyn shook her head. Neither do I. Besides, to be honest, I'm not at all sure I can play the part of a loving wife knowing John's meanness. I'm both scared and disgusted at the same time. Molly questioned the reliability of the strategy she had devised. Yeah, I didn't realize that. You have everything on your face as well as on the screen, so we have to go to the bank. And the key to this scenario is surprise and a support group. Ideally, tomorrow morning, when John comes out of your apartment, by the way, the locksmith called by you urgently changes the locks. It is unlikely that your husband has had time. Poison added to your favorite coffee or other foods that only you consume. But categorically, I would not exclude such a possibility. So Evelyn better update your grocery stockpile for good measure. Next, to catch Miranda by surprise, you need to somehow lure her out of her workplace so that she, unsuspecting, has no time to clean up unwanted data or even delete it altogether. Well, next you file for divorce and the procedure of property division begins. Perhaps it will be problematic, but it will be a battle, as they say, with an open mind. On accounting, if you still trust me, I can check everything or independent auditor's order. I think the chances of success are quite real. You could file a police report just in case John makes an attempt on your life, but he'll probably be afraid to act directly. Evelyn confessed. Molly, I prefer the second option. I can't play that kind of game. Molly shrugged. Well, that's fine. You're a straightforward and honest person, though you're easily influenced. So now let's go to bed, and tomorrow we'll do great things. Let's make a prior arrangement with the locksmith to have a locksmith on standby. Evelyn didn't know how to thank her friend, who had managed to forget the bitter insult she had suffered. All words seemed pathetic and empty. She was stunned by the breadth of Molly's soul and apologized again for having jeopardized a long-standing friendship because of a man who turned out to be a scoundrel. In the morning, Molly warned the head of the firm where she worked that she would appear at lunchtime, and together with Evelyn went to her apartment. John was already gone, and while the locksmith arrived to change the lock of the friend, they sorted out the products that could potentially be dangerous. They put jars and boxes into bags and then got busy dumping John's belongings into suitcases. By the time the hired man handed the landlady a set of keys, everything was packed. After locking up the apartment, the girls drove to their first cafe, which had once been their joint project. On the way, Evelyn sent a text message to her accountant asking her to drive up to the building where the renovations were taking place. After making sure Miranda had left, the girlfriends entered the premises. Molly immediately began to study the information on the computer, since her successor had not even bothered to change the password. Evelyn, meanwhile, dialed the number of her mother, whom she didn't dare to upset last night, briefly explained the situation to her, and asked her not to answer John and his parents' calls if possible, and to leave town for a while or at least take care of the security measures. Evelyn, don't worry about us. We've been through worse than this. If anything, be sure to call us, we'll help you. Give my love and thanks to Molly. Your father and I will be there tonight, and even sooner if necessary. Evelyn thanked her mom and promised to keep her in the loop. She ended the conversation. Molly had by now found the documents necessary to expose the dishonest accountant and change the password on the computer so that Miranda, when she came to her senses, would not be able to fix anything. The bustling life of the cafe went on as usual, and the staff had no idea that a real coup was underway. Jean was very surprised when he heard from Evelyn, who called him that she was filing for divorce. That's a very funny joke, my love, but today I dare remind you it's not April 1. Well, I've got a lot to do, so you can explain at home tonight what went through your charming head. All right, kisses, my puffy. Evelyn looked at her friend in bewilderment. He didn't think I was serious about the divorce. Molly grinned not too kindly. He's sure you're still madly in love with him. But as far as I can tell, he's probably on the phone with his mistress at this very moment to see what's going on. The nasty couple will be here soon. Most likely they will come one at a time. Molly wasn't wrong. The friends had barely had time to sip a cup of coffee with the novelty of the menu when John appeared in the office. The man's handsome face, for a split second, contorted with a grimace when he saw his wife in Molly's company. However, he instantly took control of his emotions and said hello to his wife and then to her friend. Evelyn, I insist that you explain to me what happened on the business trip. Except this conversation is clearly not for anyone's ears. Molly, do you have the decency to leave me alone with my wife? She and I have a lot to discuss. Evelyn asked. John, we can't talk alone. If you want, let's discuss what you wanted to discuss. I'm listening to you carefully. The man was puzzled, but decided to ignore the woman who always put him off balance and raised his hands in the air, as if in a sign of joking capitulation, clarified. What's this unfortunate divorce joke? Evelyn spoke calmly, although it was necessary to clench her fists to the point of whitening her knuckles. No, John, I'm not kidding at all. We're getting a divorce, and it's finalized. I don't want to say why out loud. Besides, you know them very well. Tell me, what time can you come and get your things? Jean was not going to give up without a fight, and Evelyn, who had overheard his conversation with his mistress, understood why. It wasn't enough for him what he would have gotten in a fair divorce. He wanted to take a bite out of the family pie, a bigger and tastier piece. This comparison, unintentionally brought to mind, helped the woman even listen to her unfaithful husband with some humor. Evelyn, I don't understand anything. I can only guess that Molly is involved in this whole situation. Beloved, if you want my opinion, such interference in purely family matters is out of line. Suddenly, Evelyn was even amused. Well, my love, and I thought that you would dare to call me a fat cow or a skinny cow. The fright seen in her husband's gaze gave the woman confidence, and she continued. You're mistaken if you think that Molly or anyone else but yourself is to blame for our divorce. I can't live with you anymore because you are a cheater, a traitor, and a two-faced man. You have completely lost my trust. So let me know when you can come get your stuff, and let's finish this useless conversation with you. John, that's self-control. That's chutzpah. Noticing her friend's confusion, Molly entered the unpleasant conversation. I'm not going to moralize. It seems useless. Actually, the grounds for termination of the employment contract is more than enough. So, Miranda, it is better not to threaten, but to choose a less painful option of parting with your job. If you think about it, you'll realize Evelyn's suggestion is a real mercy. Most businessmen in her position, an accountant like you would have a fun life of litigation. And from the looks of it, John would hardly rush to the rescue. So you wonder what to do. Blushing, Miranda stalked out of the office. Her lover's behavior clearly indicated that he was not going to support her. John looked at Molly with hatred and then turned to Evelyn. Okay, I get it. You need to chill out a bit. I'll drive up to the house tonight around 8:00 p.m. and we can talk in peace and hopefully without witnesses. By the way, Molly, why don't you get on with your personal life and stay out of ours? The man left the office, slamming the door. Soon Molly, asking her friend to hold on, went to her workplace asking, "Shall I come up to your place tonight?" "I don't think you should go out alone with that creep. He's not going to be able to come up with anything." Evelyn shook his head. "Thanks, Molly. I guess it's not really necessary. My parents are coming over tonight, and you've done so much for me already. Although I'd love to see you. Maybe when the unpleasant part of John's visit is over, we can sit and talk like we used to." Molly looked at the screen of her smartphone and hurriedly said goodbye. "You know, I also missed our communication. I'll try to drive up without being late. I'm afraid John won't want to pick up his stuff peacefully. So if it's okay with you, I'm gonna take Robert with me. You remember him?" Evelyn, of course, remembered the classmate who was always trying to drive a wedge, but always failing. "Honestly, I didn't know he was in town. Didn't he leave? Anyway, sure, come by. We'll have a little reunion, and my parents will be happy. Plus, it'll put everyone in a different mood. Robert always knows how to be inconspicuous and the indispensable center of any company. I still wonder why you keep him at a distance, to be honest." Molly didn't answer the question, and making sure that her friend's thoughts were at least a little distracted from her troubles, she hurried away. She was indeed already almost late for work. John had prepared a real gentleman's set of reconciliation for the evening meeting with Evelyn, bringing with him a huge bouquet of her favorite flowers, a bottle of champagne, a decent brand, a baguette, and caviar. The man expected that the woman would not resist his charm and eloquence, as well as the delicacy. And with difficulty he suppressed a sigh of disappointment when the key failed to fit the lock. Because of this unexpected obstacle, his mood soured dramatically, but there was nothing to be done. He had planned to make peace with his wife, to beg her forgiveness so he could eliminate her later. Had to stand in front of the door, calming down, and wanted to get over his anger. When the rage-infused breath came back to normal, John pressed the call button. The fact that Evelyn was not alone in the apartment was another unpleasant surprise. His wife's parents stood behind their daughter's back with eloquent glances. But he, as if not noticing the bags and boxes in the hallway, said hello, crossed the threshold and spoke. "Evelyn, my love, we should at least try to negotiate this peacefully. And you've called in a whole support group. I meant it kindly. I meant it nicely. Maybe there's no reason for us to break up. I love you, you love me. Why do we need a divorce? Well, things happen in life. We all fall short of the ideal. We have to be able to correct our mistakes and work on our family relationships. Do you want me to confess my love to you in front of your parents? I'm still crazy about you. And you're all business. So I've made a mistake. What man doesn't have an easy affair? I swear, my love, I swear on anything. I'll never look at another man again. What do you think? Evelyn was shocked for the umpteenth time by the behavior, so far, of her husband. How calmly he speaks, with flowers, with a bag. So confident in his charm and the success of the visit. He calls me his favorite. God, how can I get through this meeting without crying in front of this scoundrel? Evelyn grinned unhappily and answered, Here's what I'm thinking, John. How did I manage to marry such a lying monster? Only about 24 hours ago, you and your mistress were planning to eliminate me quietly. And now you're trying to make a good impression, make up. You even swear, as sincere as it may seem, that you'll be faithful. Good thing I didn't say, till death do us part. In the context of what I heard last night, that wouldn't even be funny. Get your stuff and get out of my life. Just so you know, if you do bad things, you'll be dealt with. Take your chances for a peaceful resolution. The irritation that John tried so hard to conceal came out. I take it these bags, so kindly packed to avoid wasting my time, contain only clothes. Actually, as an official husband, I'm entitled to some of the equipment too. Evelyn, did you really expect me to just take the clothes? But that's not even serious. You can't equate nobility with stupidity. I'll take everything I'm legally entitled to, so if you don't want to waste your nerves, we'll settle this amicably. Here's how it works. I'll take everything I'm entitled to, and we'll have a quiet divorce. Evelyn's father intervened in the conversation. Dear son-in-law, you seem to have a law degree. Remind me, what is the penalty for planning to commit a crime, a group of persons by prior conspiracy? You still want to take the equipment? What would you need it for in prison? Can you give me a hint? While John considered how to counter this more than serious accusation, Robert, whom he didn't even notice at first, almost under his elbow, but without using brute force, led the man out of the apartment of his almost ex-wife. Following in the stairwell were out of the bag. Separately, Evelyn took out a boxed set, presented at the wedding by her mother-in-law. Then she ran back into the room and brought out a sturdy bag containing the game console she'd once given her adoring husband. Here's John. There's also discs in the bag. Play, have fun, but don't even try to reconnect with me. It's over. I realize you're a fool for your integrity, but please don't bother me again. Enough for the sake of all the good, bright, joyful things between us. There's no need for any more of this. John answered nothing and abruptly taking, almost snatching from Evelyn's hands, the objects dear to him, turned around and went to the elevator. Yes, going to meet his wife, he had expected a very different result. During the day, when Evelyn had uttered unflattering epithets, he had hoped that someone from the staff had told her about the hurtful words. Now it was clear his wife had found out about the insidious plan to eliminate her. Apparently, Miranda was right to be worried about the strange noise. I should have gone yesterday to see what was going on. Maybe the situation would have turned out in his favor. Now the only thing left to do was to pack her bags and go to her mistress. Unlike John, who had been practically escorted out, the people left in Evelyn's apartment were in good spirits. Jenna and James, speaking in turn, suggested, "Stay with us for a while, Evelyn, while things calm down. In fact, let's all come over to our place now. We have specialty dumplings. We made a freezer full just yesterday." Robert smiled broadly, instantly remembering the hospitality of his former classmate's house. He didn't answer, however, leaving it up to Evelyn and Molly to decide. Evelyn and Molly looked at each other and nodded synchronously. Indeed, her apartment, betrayed by her husband, the woman now perceived desecrated. She decided to make repairs, at least cosmetic, and rearrange the furniture. She wanted to update the furnishings as much as possible so that nothing reminded not too long marriage. Having voiced her thoughts, the woman received the enthusiastic support of relatives and friends. Robert promised that in the near future he would call a reliable acquaintance who is engaged in repairs and will be able to carry out updates without nerves. Evelyn was grateful to her parents, who, sensing her mood, did not leave her alone and even arranged a small but well-fed and cheerful feast. After a little sitting with the young people, the hosts went to their room, and the 3 former classmates were engrossed in memories of funny school pranks. "Listen, Robert, what made you come back to the city of your childhood? There were rumors that you opened a hotel complex somewhere in the South." Evelyn asked. The rumors were right, but as always, a little distorted. "I was actually living in the South, renovating my grandparents' house. My parents live there now, and they like the climate better than here. I also put a guest house on the plot so that my sister's family would have an autonomous dwelling. This building is far from being a hotel complex. Yes, and not for profit it was built, but without too much modesty to say, very cozy turned out. But I didn't want to stay there in the South forever. I have a heartfelt interest here. I lived a little away and realized that I can't go on. I've had enough of being a bachelor. And I'm tired of being afraid that someone more brazen will steal her away. Finally, I'm so happy for you guys. Of course, I'll organize a wedding cake of your choice and design. Just tell me what date." The evening, which had started so tense, even unpleasantly ended with a pleasant conversation discussing the details of the wedding. Evelyn was pleased for her friend and cautiously asked, "Molly, do you want to work with me again? In addition to a salary and a percentage of sales will be. Of course, I understand that you need to think about it. Well, if you don't want to, maybe you can recommend someone." Molly didn't lie. "You know, I think everything always works out for the best. This job that I have, I'm happy with it. And frankly, there's one more thing that's stopping me." Molly was silent, and then she turned to Robert. "Can I tell you one more of our secrets?" After a kiss on the cheek, which was decoded as permission, Molly told her friend about her pregnancy. "Well, that's the reason we decided to rush the wedding. Kind of like having the baby in a legal marriage. So, you know, there's no point in you hiring me. Maternity pay and sick leave, then let me go with the baby." Evelyn was glad that Molly and Robert, who had been waiting for her favor for so long, had settled down, and wished them nothing but happiness in her life. Things were complicated, however. John's parents overpowered her, persuading her both on the phone and in person that Evelyn must necessarily forgive her straying husband. Cindy's mother-in-law came to her almost ex-sister-in-law at work and began to lament to Evelyn. "Why are you mad at John? All men cheat, but some men manage to hide their affairs. John's an honest guy. He's not in the habit of lying. You should appreciate that. So right now in front of me, call and make an appointment with him." She's offended. If you ask me, Oscar Wilde was right when he said that resentment is the lot of maids. People who are self-confident don't allow themselves to feel that way. Enough of this nonsense. As far as I know, John is already desperate and does not even expect you to respond favorably to his initiatives. Why don't you take steps toward reconciliation? Think about it. You're 25 years old. Not exactly the freshest commodity on the marriage market. Divorced, even without a trailer. It's still not good enough. All you've got is an odd business in a field where competition is huge and ruin at any moment threatens, and arrogance. So pick up the phone, make the call. What are you waiting for? Evelyn, tired of listening to moralizing, gloomy forecasts, veiled remarks, insults, direct orders. So she said, "Dear Cindy, that's enough. I have endured listening to you for a long time, but I will not be silent any longer. I'm not divorcing your wonderful son just because he was having an affair behind my back with an accountant. I don't know how John put it to you, but cheating is nothing. What I never expected when I got married was that my spouse would get so tired of me that he would plan to physically eliminate me, and then bury me, or better yet, turn me to ashes. You should be glad I didn't report him and his girlfriend to the police. Not even those traitors, but you and your husband. It's hard to imagine what respectable parents can feel when they find out they raised a scoundrel. I hope you realize now that I will not call you, let alone reconcile with your son." Cindy said her goodbyes and left. Evelyn mentally reproached herself for not holding back and telling her mother-in-law the hard truth. But now she could be sure that there would be no more requests for reconciliation from her. Divorce and division of property was not smooth. However, with the help of an experienced lawyer who was recommended by Evelyn Robert, she managed to keep the entire chain of establishments. John gritted his teeth, as it was possible to prove the fact of repeated misappropriation of money from the accounts of his wife, Miranda. The man had to help his mistress out of this delicate situation because she promised to keep silent about the crime that they were planning. In fact, it turned out that John, after 3 years of married life, had only acquired a car. In addition, he had to move out of the cozy Evelyn apartment. With his parents, after the truth was revealed to his mother, he quarreled. Avoiding to upset her husband, Cindy did not tell him about the meanness that her son was planning. But the man was not happy without it and reprimanded John for parting with his clever wife. Miranda, her lover's parents, took it in stride. She, right at the time of acquaintance, capriciously declared that the negative attitude to himself is not going to tolerate, and John had to urgently look for a conveniently located rental apartment. Since the one rented by his mistress was far from the office, the man had to leave some of his things at his parents' place. Cindy, sorting out the bags and boxes at her son's request, sighed bitterly when she discovered that several teacups had been damaged during the move. So believed the omens about broken dishes and good luck, the woman thought. She felt sorry for her son, but even more ashamed of Evelyn for his unfortunate scheme. Indeed, such a thing from John, whom she and her husband had tried to bring up properly, a good man, she could not have expected in any way. There was nothing wrong for Evelyn in her new status as a divorcee, as her mother-in-law characterized it. The woman felt free and even happy. She decided to get rid of the room where she had overheard Joan talking to Miranda. Of course, it wasn't the Walls' fault that they were silent witnesses to a nefarious plan, but she didn't want to be constantly reminded of the negativity. She had to pay a small penalty to the owners, but Evelyn canceled the lease with the opening of the third cafe. The woman decided not to be in a hurry, but to pay close attention to the existing one, and without rushing to look for a new premises, the location of which will be more successful, thanks to the fact that Molly gladly accepted from Evelyn help in preparing for the wedding celebration. In the first month after the divorce was no time to think about how to continue to live after the terrible betrayal. In addition, it was necessary to look after the repair of the apartment, and of course, with particular trepidation, Evelyn and her assistants worked on the wedding cake. The products were not of the most standard type, but no one from the team was intimidated by the difficulties. As a result, the cake turned out to be a real work of art and became not only a wonderful decoration, but also an excellent dessert. Evelyn, although worried about her brainchild, had fun, as did the other guests. And she wished Molly and Robert well from the bottom of her heart. She was pleased to feel the gentle atmosphere of other people's happiness, and for the first time since she had met them, she felt nothing else but joy for their old acquaintances. There was no resentment and anger, no disappointment and despair. She was completely free of resentment. It was truly a wonderful feeling. Evelyn was learning to move on with her life. Though her parents did not kick her out of the apartment where the woman's childhood had been spent, she moved in. The kitchen and bathroom were barely renovated. I can sleep on the kitchen sofa, and in the daytime I am not at home, so there will be no inconvenience. The team of specialists, recommended by Robert's acquaintances, really worked qualitatively and quickly, and at the final settlement, Evelyn asked Mason, the main one from the team, "In about 3 months, or a little more, I will need to do some renovations in the room that will be used as a cafe pastry shop. There will, of course, be some nuances involved with both the finishes and the purpose of the room. Is it okay if I offer you such a job?" Mason was happy to respond, "Sure. If you want, I can visit the site soon, estimate the scope of work, preliminary estimate, of course. How long will it take to repair and the approximate cost?" "The thing is that there is no object yet," Evelyn admitted. "I can't find a room that meets all my requirements." When asked by the foreman about what the woman wants so special, she said that the location is important to her, what institutions are located in the neighborhood, the condition of the building and communications, and, of course, the cost of rent. And then she suddenly came to her senses and laughed. "Oh, I'm holding you up. I got carried away. Sorry, have a good day." The foreman, saying goodbye, promised to let me know if he heard about such an ideal room from Evelyn's point of view. The woman took it as a gesture of simple politeness. But a week later, she did receive a call from Mason. The man offered an option that seemed fabulous to Evelyn. After hearing the address, however, she grew sad. "Thank you, Mason, for your trouble. But in that neighborhood, the cost of rent is too high for me." However, the man insisted that Evelyn should definitely call the owner. "The owner's phone number is William. I'll text it to you right now. The interesting thing is that once 10 years ago, I was one of those who did the finishing work in this room. Call, maybe you can negotiate a discount. About your desire to open a cafe in a place like this, I told him briefly. In general, try, after all, for the demand for money do not take money." Evelyn thanked the inadvertent helper in the search of the premises, and barely after receiving the message, made a call. William had indeed been alerted by Mason, but offered to meet for a detailed discussion directly at the premises the woman was interested in. Evelyn suggested that the businesslike conversation, which had begun with a discussion of the details of the contract, continue at one of her 2 cafes. "William, I think you will be able to understand that your premises are optimally suited to my wishes and purpose." The imposing man agreed, but after the meal he grinned and said, "Evelyn, everything was delicious, and you are a real pro in the culinary arts. I'm sorry, but you're being very naive when it comes to negotiating a lease. Why are you making your interest so obvious? It's only natural that it would increase the rent, but I'm not going to profit from you." The man made a good discount, and after a while he became a guest of the new establishment. Not immediately, but a romantic relationship began between William and Evelyn. On the anniversary of the opening, the cafe was closed. Inside celebrated the wedding of newlyweds, whose destinies were linked by this room. 10 years later, William and Evelyn had a son and a daughter. The woman was happy, and about her unsuccessful first marriage, practically did not remember, until her cart collided with another cart at the supermarket. Evelyn began to apologize and was surprised to see Miranda standing in front of her. There was almost nothing left of the former beauty. Even her eyes had recently turned bright blue, as if they'd been watered down. Undoubtedly, she recognized her lover's ex-wife too, because she pushed Evelyn's cart and followed her. John, once so trim, turned from the perpendicular row of racks on which were located, according to the sign Beer and Snacks, a stooped, gaunt man, who seemed to have fallen firmly under Miranda's heel, caused Evelyn's bewilderment. Had I ever been so hurt by his betrayal? The woman mentally even thanked fate for the pain she had to go through. But now, everything was perfect.